Good morning, you beautiful bunch of fuckers, and welcome to my world. I'm your host, Kevin Rutherford. It is Tuesday, July 16th. We are here live. It's time for the Power Hour. I've got the team from Pittsburgh. Well, I've got Bruce so far. I think, oh no, it looks like they might nope, not yet. Bruce is here. We've got the next 3 hours to talk about maintenance. If you've got any kind of maintenance questions whatsoever, engines, performance, fuel mileage, modifications, upgrades, troubleshooting, emissions, electronics, you name it, we'll talk about it. All you have to do is pick up the phone and join us. 855-950-3835. If you're listening on the app, you can hit that call now button. We'll take your calls and answer your questions. I'm going to bring in Bruce Mallinson from Pittsburgh Power right now. Bruce, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. It's a beautiful day here in the East Coast.
It's beautiful here as well, although they're calling for high 90s here today. That's pretty unusual for us.
Yeah, we're going to 99. It's too hot.
It is too hot. 89 I like. 99's too hot.
I like 82 to 85.
82, that's even better. Yeah, we had one of those days yesterday, it was pretty spectacular.
Okay. So I'm going to start out with a easy health question for you, and then we'll go into some fuel mileages and other things.
Okay.
Monk fruit sweetener. Is it better than sugar?
Absolutely.
Or is it?
Absolutely. So one of the things we try to clarify with people, and this gets really confusing, is for decades we had like natural sweeteners that are very high in carbohydrates, sugar, honey, agave syrup. For a while everybody was onto agave syrup saying it's the best thing going for a sweetener. It's one of the worst. It is completely natural, but it's really high in fructose, which is, we got to be careful with fructose. Honey can be high in fructose, but honey has a lot of other benefits. Then we had all of the artificial sweeteners that started hitting around the 70s, and we started getting diet sodas, and those artificial sweeteners, stay away from those. Those are all awful. They're really bad for your brain. They've been linked to MS and all kinds of health issues. You want to stay away from those completely. But then in the last decade or so, we've gotten a lot of natural sweeteners that don't impact your blood sugar, and many of them aren't even digested normally. And that's one of the reasons they don't impact your blood sugar. So we have a group that are called sugar alcohols. So anytime you see OSE at the end of the word, that could be a sugar alcohol. And they taste very sweet, but your body doesn't digest them. So you get the sweet taste, but then they move right through your body. Those are fine. They can sometimes cause some digestive issues for people because they kind of move right through your body. So you got to be careful with those. You don't want to use a lot of those. Then we started getting some of these natural sweeteners that aren't sugar alcohols. Stevia is completely natural. I have a stevia plant growing in my garden. Super easy to grow.
Oh, so stevia is okay?
Stevia is a natural plant. You could walk out in the garden, take a leaf off, and chew it. It is so sweet you almost can't stand it. But it doesn't really impact blood sugar the way that sugar does. Then monk fruit is another really good one. Now, monk fruit is usually more expensive. Monk fruit's a little harder to obtain. Stevia can have a kind of a weird bitter aftertaste for some people, and depending on the variety of the plant itself. So now you're starting to see some blends of monk fruit to get a better taste, and stevia because it's less expensive. That's a pretty good combination sometimes. Now there's another one you want to look for. You're not going to find it in a lot of products yet. I don't know if I've really seen it in any products yet, but you can buy it and sweeten things on your own. This one is a lot like stevia and monk fruit, completely natural, doesn't really impact blood sugar. It's a lot like sugar. It feels like sugar, tastes like sugar. It's actually less sweet than sugar. Now, stevia is like, I don't know, 200 times more sweet than sugar. Monk fruit's kind of the same
Oh,
way,
wow.
so you use really small amounts of it. But the new one on the market that's really interesting, there's some research that shows it actually helps lower blood sugar, which is odd. We've never seen a sweetener really do that. There's some other health benefits to it. It's pretty new on the market. It's called allulose. And remember that OSE again, it's a form of a sugar alcohol. But this one, they say, for most people doesn't cause any kind of digestive issues. But if you're going to, say, bake with it, or I've made ice cream with it, you use 1.5 times. So it seems like you're using crazy amounts of this stuff because, if you make a quart of ice cream, you put a cup of sugar in it. It's a lot. Now you're going to put 1.5 cups
Wow.
of the allulose in there. It takes about 1.5 times to
So
get the
there's
same
that much
sweetness.
sugar in ice cream. So if you go and you buy what used to be a half a gallon of
Ooh,
Briars or
yeah.
whatever,
That's a
how
lot of
much
sugar.
sugar's in that?
I've seen quart recipes for a quart of ice cream with almost 2 cups of sugar in a quart. Think about that.
Wow.
And here's the
Yeah.
problem.
Wow.
I don't need sweetness in ice cream. I mean, I'm fine with, a chocolate ice cream that's not sweet at all. So I thought, well, I'll just make my own and I just won't use a lot of sugar.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is sugar isn't there just for the sweetness. Sugar is there. Sugar makes ice cream really rich and creamy. It gives it a great texture. Every time I kept trying to make ice cream with either very little sugar or none at all, you get this dry, hard, crumbly ice cream. It's not good at all. So you've got to put something in there. Honey works, maple syrup works, but all the things that work to make your ice cream creamy are also loaded with carbs. The allulose is the one exception to that.
Okay. All right.
So you thought that was
Well,
going to be a simple
that was,
question and you got a 10-minute answer.
yeah. No, that's all right. That's all right. A little bag of monk fruit lasts me a long time. I just use a little bit
Yeah,
in
it's
my tea. So
really sweet.
okay. So on to truck stuff.
Yes.
We have been doing a lot of troubleshooting and helping people on the phone that are not clients. They're buying generic parts for on their big cams or whatever. They hear about us, they call us, and we spend a lot of time with them. We're going to have to start charging those people hourly because of the time involved.
Bruce, it's interesting
I
to
don't
bring this
care
up.
if the
Go ahead.
I don't care if the person is just uses the catalyst or the flashpoint or is a client every now and then. If they bought a damper and balancer 5 years ago, that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. It's the people that heard about us and said, call these people, they'll fix your problem.
Right.
And they've never done any business. So that's become quite the issue. Some days I'll spend 5-6 hours on the phone answering these questions, and some of them are long, especially
Yes.
when they can't tell you what parts they bought, and they don't have part numbers, and they don't know their CPL or engine number, and they don't have a timing tool or know anybody with a timing tool. So it's become a problem.
So, Bruce, let me comment on that.
You were going to say something.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought this up today. And this is something, we discuss around here a lot internally. I try not to really talk about this too much on the air, but at times you kind of have to. And it just came to a head for me recently. I really can't spend time on the phone with individual callers. You still do that. You do it all day. You do it every day. You do it on nights. You do it on weekends. I've never seen anybody who takes more calls from individuals than you do. I've said that before. I'll say it again. You've been doing it ever since I've known you. I've been sitting at dinner with you when you take calls. So I've seen it. I had to give that up a long time ago. I mean, I just can't do it. I wouldn't get anything else done. So we put a lot of things in place so you don't have to do that. And right now is one of them. We're on the air 3 hour, up to 3 hours every day. If I have questions, I go to 3 hours. I almost never cut it off when there's still a question there. There are days I've gone almost 4 hours because we still had questions coming in. We don't charge anything at all for this show. We thought about it for a while. I probably should have, and we didn't. And now we're kind of set that we're not going to. I do a group coaching call every week, and that's only $75 a month, and I will work with somebody no matter how in-depth the problem is. I was working with the guy who was sending me messages, and he was actually growing his trucking company and needed to buy a terminal. I was helping him with the real estate part of it. I mean, we can go really deep on the group coaching call, so that's another option for people that need it. We have the CMC if you want to learn about just pure trucking. You can be in the CMC. We also have a website that is a social media site, just like, Facebook or X. Or we started it because I was constantly being censored and deleted on the other sites. So we started our own, so you can't censor or delete me. I can post whatever I want. We had problems with trolls, people just coming in to cause problems. They had no other purpose there. So the easy way to solve that, we started charging. We charged $3. Now, you understand credit card transactions. You pay $1 per transaction and then a percentage of the amount. So on $3 a month, I don't even get two of it. It's $1 something we end up getting. We only do it because we can control the people who are in there. From the day we implemented that, we haven't had a single issue with troublemakers or trolls. They just disappeared completely. I don't always go in there to answer questions.
I've never heard you use that term about. I remember that one guy that was a troublemaker.
Oh, that was the worst of them, but we've had lots of those. And he was actually the one that finally we decided we had to start charging because he was a bigger troublemaker on the website than he even was on the show. So we put in that policy.
How do people have? I think people have time.
I know. I know. Yeah. So, I get individual questions everywhere. I get them on YouTube. I get them on Facebook. I get them on LinkedIn. I get them on X. I get them on our site. I can't respond to those. One, it's not an efficient way to try to communicate with somebody for the kind of problems we talk about. Because, on this show, somebody asks us a question, and what's the very next thing we have to do? We have to ask them several questions usually, right? What engine? How many miles? It goes on and on and on before we ever get to their question. So now think about it trying to do this online. Somebody asks a question. Now I have to type back in, and I hate typing. I have to type back in, well, I need to know this and this and this and this. And then the next response, they give me 2 of the thises that I ask for, but I ask for 4. And I can't answer it with only 2. So now I got to send it back again. Then they get it back to me. Now I finally sit down and I type out a fairly long answer, because just like you just found out, a simple question about sweeteners, and I got to go on for 10 minutes to make sure somebody understands it. So now I got to type all that out. And I get done with all that. This has probably occurred over 2 or 3 days now. This is one person with one question. Now I finally answer the question, and then they say, well, I forgot to tell you. Now we got to do it again. I just can't do it. So even on our site where we do charge a couple bucks to be a member, people were getting upset that I wasn't answering all of their questions. And I just cut a video about it last night so I could explain it rather than trying to type it all out, that I give people more opportunities to ask me questions about anything free than anybody else I know. And then we have some paid options, but I just can't do individual questions online. Occasionally, if I see one and it's a quick, simple answer, I'll answer it. And maybe that's why people expect me to do it. But for the most part, I just can't.
That's right. So I have a fellow here that I've been helping. His name's Jake, and this is the guy we took the Boss turbo off his D-Deck for and put our performance turbo on. And He sent, Bruce, hope you're doing well. Just sent a video of running down the road after I got your tune in on Saturday. JR was great to deal with. So was Terry Belton, who did the remote. This thing is fun to drive and has power.
Awesome.
It runs way better than what the guy in Iowa had done to it.
I love that.
So that's nice to hear.
It is.
And this is the fellow that it was a Saturday, and I had company, and I think we did 22 messages back and forth on how to install the turbo the proper way. And then we have Cole Fairbrook, the fellow with the 2020 T680 with the Packard, the MX-13, the 12-speed automatic, 264 gears, runs 55 mile an hour indirect at 1,240 RPM, which would be his 11th gear. Runs the max mileage, fuel-borne catalyst, and our flash point. He does have an APU. His idle time is 2%. He runs the APU about 8.2 hours per day, uses 2.3 gallons in the APU. But last week, his average on DEF, 316 miles per gallon on DEF, and his fuel mileage was 10.42 last week. His overall average since June is, where did that number go? God, you make notes and you go over these notes.
Bruce,
it was slightly less. It was in the tens. 10.11 is his overall average since June. So.
I have all of his numbers in front of me, by the way. His his lifetime on this truck is 8.34. His 90-day is 9.10. His 60-day is 9.19. And his 30-day, like you just said, is 10.11. It's interesting, Bruce, every topic you've brought up so far was on my list to talk about something, including this. So let me give you the quote that I posted today from one of my favorite authors, Seth Godin. I posted this because it's absolutely true. Listen to this. The people most likely to sign up for coaching or additional learning are the folks who are already good at their craft. And I know you have been a lifelong learner. You've taken sales training, business training, you've continued to learn about trucks and what you do, and you are a lifetime learner. Think about that. The people most likely to sign up for coaching or additional learning are the folks who are already good at their craft. And then he goes on, and he's quoting now, I'm terrible at this can lead to, and I don't want to be reminded of it, or I don't want to waste their time, or I'm never going to get better. When it's possible to get better, embracing mediocrity isn't a useful strategy. I'd rather have a surgeon who regularly attends training, wouldn't you? Read a book, find a coach, organize a group. If you're serious about getting better, you'll improve. Learning creates more competence, but first it amplifies our feeling of incompetence. And I go through this all the time. Somebody will bring up something new and I'll say, I don't know anything about that. But my next reaction is, I better learn. Because somebody's going to ask me about this, and I need to learn. The reason I bring that up right now, I quoted it this morning, I posted this, but it's interesting that you bring up Cole, because Cole is an absolute freak when it comes to these fuel mileage numbers. You should see what he posted on the site I was just talking about, our paid social media site. He put up all this incredible data and the modifications he's done and I had a hard time going through it, and I understand all this stuff. He put so much work into this, and you know what Cole just signed up for this week? My coaching program. And I had to tell him, Cole, the only thing you might get out of this coaching program is just me reassuring you that you're already doing this really, really well.
And he doesn't have all the aerodynamics on the trailer yet.
That's what that he made that point. He was showing the potential, and I mean, it was so in depth and so well written and so well researched and explained. And then he ends up in my coaching program. I'm like, you could be running the coaching program on fuel mileage. He could be. And business. Then we started talking about his business, and he had a couple questions. Should he put some trucks back on the road, or should he just sell them? And he already had all the right answers. He knew what he was doing. I was just there to kind of be a second opinion. So I find it interesting somebody at that level is willing to pay the $75 a month to just kind of run their ideas by me. And we did come up with some new stuff. But on the other hand, I'll get people who call me on the show. They're either ready to buy a truck or they already made the mistake and bought the truck, and they are in real trouble and they don't understand much of anything. I mean, I can tell they really don't understand business. They're not mechanically inclined. They don't understand fuel mileage. Those are real handicaps when you're trying to buy a truck and start a business. If you don't know anything about any of those things, and I'll mention to them, hey, look, I can help you on the air, but you really need some more in-depth information on this. You should either be in the CMC or the coaching call or both. And those are the people who will never sign up. I've never understood this phenomenon other than that's why those other people are already so good and they know so much, because they're always willing to learn. And it seems like some people just don't think they need to learn anything. They think they could just call and I'll answer all their questions and make everything better. But if you don't have a basic understanding of this stuff, I can't just answer your questions. It's not going to do you any good.
All right, that's right. My chiropractor that I've been seeing since 1979, he's in Pittsburgh, and I'm in Maryland, but I see him every chance when I go back to the shop. And he's 77 years old, retired, but didn't last long, started another practice. And I said, you know so much more than all these other chiropractors I go and see. He said, that's because I never gave up learning.
Bruce, I met him.
Same thing.
I went over to an appointment with you, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I met him. What a great guy.
Yeah.
I mean, immediately you can tell that about him.
Mm-hmm. He's about 6 foot tall, 32-inch waist. He can fly into Colorado from 900 feet in Pittsburgh, fly into Colorado, Uber on up into the mountains, jump on a bicycle, and ride over Vail Pass.
I believe it. You could see him. I mean, I've
seen him do it.
Yeah. You can immediately, you see he's in incredible shape, and I don't even want to add for his age. He's just in incredible shape, period. You could compare him to most 20-year-olds.
But so many other chiropractors I go to, I think once they get out of school, they figure they're done. And they don't do the seminars. They don't continue to learn. And I go in and I'll say, do we do muscle testing? No, we don't do that. And I'll say several other things that I want them to check and do. And they just look at me.
I know.
And the one I'm seeing here in Maryland, I've actually taught her a few things about muscle testing and things. And anyway, I learned something this weekend.
One other thing on that, Bruce.
We got caught in a storm.
Because you and I have talked about this before. I know you've heard me say this, but we haven't said it in a long time, and this needs to be said. And this applies to just every occupation that I know, really. You just mentioned some things about this, but I was asking Mike Beckett, when I first met Mike way back when, we were doing a tour around the country with Volvo. They put a tour together, and they hired Mike to teach people alignments at every stop, and they hired me to do kind of, business and fuel mileage stuff. And so I got to spend a lot of time with Mike. It was the first time I met him, and he actually showed me how he aligns a truck with, duct tape, a string, and a tape measure. And I was just blown away. I mean, I immediately started to understand alignments, and I always thought they were like black magic. I had no idea what somebody was doing when they were aligning a vehicle. And he made it so easy. And then at one point I went to him, and and this is when I still had trucks, and I was always fighting with alignment on my trucks, always. And then I understood it. So I went back to went back to the shops that do my alignments, and I said, look, here's what I understand about alignments. And they're like, oh, you don't need to know all that. We just put it on the machine. Well, Mike explained to me why
Yeah.
that machine sucks in 10 different ways. And then I would start to explain that to them, why their machine isn't right. And they didn't want to hear it. They got really defensive about it. And I went back to Mike and I said, Mike, I don't get it. I said, how could these people be doing this for decades and one, not understand this, and two, get defensive when I try to explain it to them? And they just tell me, well, how many trucks have you aligned? That's always their question. And my answer is, look, I've never aligned a single truck. I've watched it done, and now I see how damn simple it is. Why don't you guys get this? Well, our machine is the best machine. And I said, well, then how come every time I leave here, my truck still has an alignment issue? Well, no, it doesn't. And if it does, it's the tire. And I said, why is that like this? How can they not get this? And he said, look, Kevin, he quoted this, was the only time I've ever heard it, but it made so much sense. I've repeated it so many times. He said, most people who say they have 20 years of experience, what they really have is 1 year of experience 20 times. He said, very few people truly have 20 years of experience. He said they learn the basics, they start doing it, and they do it over and over and over for years, and they're never willing to learn.
Well, that was at the CMC in Kansas City at Harris.
Yeah.
And it's the first time I saw Mike Beckett. And when I saw him out there with his tape measure and his string, it brought back memories of the early 70s. The guy who would do the alignments on the 66 Corvette for road racing. He had a scribe, and he would scribe a line in the center of the steer tires. And he would get out his tape measure. I'd hold one end, he would hold the other. Now, it was up on a machine, but the final stuff was done with a tape measure.
Yep.
And then we, knowing the angle of the bank on the track we were going to go to, we would use a tape measure and a level to do the rear tires.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I saw Mike do that, I thought, you got to be kidding me.
And you get...
And I had to buy his machine. We bought his machines.
Yeah, right.
And you know,
Go ahead.
We don't have any complaints when we do an alignment using the MD alignment system.
It's so simple. And when you explain it or when you watch somebody do it, either with the machine, because all the machine really did, it's basically a laser pointer and some other things that just made his process faster. It's not like a machine with, tires are sitting on pads and turntables. And it's right. Just, you can carry it around in a bag, and you could walk into any parking lot and align the truck sitting right there in the parking lot, which is what they do all the time. And it is incredibly accurate. It works.
So I referred a fellow to Mike Beckett this week. His
Good.
name is Richard Petty.
That's easy to remember.
Richard Petty. And he's pulling a tanker. And it's about 10 years old, and it's wearing the inside of the inside dual. And to me, it sounds like his axle's flexing, like I've heard Mike talk about.
Right.
I told him I wasn't an authority on that, but he needs to call Mike, and I gave him Mike's phone number. And I checked with him last night, and he hadn't called him yet. But
yeah.
That was pretty neat, Richard Petty.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say, Mike is a great resource. Obviously, he does our show on Thursdays, still answers questions for people all the time. He still does a ton of training all over the country. His son Kevin's kind of running the shop now. They're not doing alignments themselves anymore. Over the years, Mike used to do them, then Kevin did them for a while. We're sending, and we have great MD alignment shops around the country. One of our absolute favorites is Chad Hone right there in Kansas City. You've met Chad. Chad's just an incredible guy. He trained with Mike a couple decades ago. And the thing that really, really makes Chad stand out, because there are a lot of really good MD alignment people that can align your truck. I would put Chad at the absolute top of the list for customer service. I've never seen a one-person company like Chad is take the time over and over and over to talk to the clients. I mean, he's only making money. We just talked about this before. He's only making money if he's turning wrenches on somebody's truck. He doesn't get paid to give advice or to talk to people, but I've seen him. He does follow-up calls. He checks to make sure the alignment held and everything's working right and there aren't any problems. And he really understands customer service.
Well, that's a good guy. So Shauna Gray should be calling in today.
Oh, we have
Talk
Dr.
about
Jane
LifeWave.
in the queue, by the way.
Shauna's in the queue?
No, Dr. Jane is.
Oh, Dr. Jane is. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, we can talk about LifeWave. This is the patch. I'm wearing them right now. I bought some to try them, and I like them. And I like what I'm feeling.
Good. Let us keep us informed on how that's working.
I will. I'm going to be attending a Zoom seminar tonight that's going to last about an hour. There's a group from Napanee, Indiana. There's about 150 of them that are on it, and I'm going to be listening to their Zoom meeting.
Is that an open Zoom
Very
call?
interesting. It is.
Can you send me the link?
I sure can.
I'd like to watch that.
And, it's changed my attitude towards life. Made me a happier person. I'm not letting little things bother me like they used to. You know, as you get older, some certain things can bother you. And
get off my lawn, damn
not
it!
letting that happen. No, I could care less. You can play on my lawn all you want. But the thing that happened to President Trump in Butler, I mean, I would have been in rage without having these patches on. And some of the things that we've heard, because, you know, Butler's only where this happened was 11, 12 miles away. And we know that farm grounds because we do truck pulling there. And but I stayed calm through it. I was really surprised, and I like what I'm feeling. So
good.
But let's bring Dr. Jane on.
Yes, let's. Hey, Eric and Leroy, you know what? I'm just going to bring those guys in just so they don't feel left out.
Okay.
And then we're going to go to Dr. Jane. So Eric, Leroy, good morning, guys. We're not ignoring you. Well, we are kind of, but I brought you in now.
I was starting to get a complex over here.
I figured you would. I figured maybe that was long enough, but we brought you in. We're not going to let you talk yet because we're going to bring in Dr. Jane. I think we gave her a homework assignment last week. Dr. Jane, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
So what's on your mind this morning?
Well, I wanted to hear, I've got some things I wanted to talk to you guys about, but I'll definitely need Leroy and Eric to help out with some of the terms I've come up with.
Oh, good. Okay.
But this is, I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a good discussion. But that was a perfect segue, your comments about lifelong learning. So based on your experience with the biodiesel that you picked up somewhere on the road, you probably want to recap that for me and for the audience. But based on that and then being tasked to go forth and try to bring some insights about biodiesel into the Let's Truck audience world, I've learned a lot. I did some really fun research.
Oh, good.
Found some great articles, and so I'm all prepped and ready to share. And we're going to need some help from the mechanic side.
Got it. So I'll kind of set the stage here, and then we'll kind of move forward from there. So I'll go all the way back to when they first introduced biodiesels, and I don't remember the year, but I started getting a lot of calls about it, people asking me, and I had to say, look, I don't know. I don't know anything about this stuff. And in the beginning, we had filters clogging, especially in colder weather. A lot of inconsistency in the fuel. Some people were actually calling and reporting better fuel economy. Some people were calling and reporting worse fuel economy. And part of the problem with ever using fuel economy as a measure of anything is that there are just way too many variables. I actually started a list one time, and I should go dig it up somewhere, of all of the things that can impact fuel economy. And I would put down anything that could do it, whether we had control over it or not. Many of the things we have some control over, some of the things we just don't. But I stopped the list when it got over 80. 80 different things that could impact fuel economy. And when you're talking about one truck and one person who runs over the road, different loads all the time, different terrain all the time, the variables can absolutely wipe out any kind of trying to measure a true improvement. And over the years, I have to fight against this. I'll tell people, hey, look, try this and you'll get better fuel economy. And they'll call me and they'll say, I can't believe this. I tried what you said and I got a mile per gallon better. And I'd have to stop and go, well, no, you didn't. Oh, no, I'll show you. And I'll say, look, don't show me the numbers. I know your numbers show you got a mile per gallon better than maybe you did on your last tank, but we have to look at all the reasons why. And I start going through all these variables, or the other way. I say, hey, look, this helps your fuel economy. Somebody calls me after their first tank trying it, says, that didn't do anything. I lost 0.3. Well, no, you didn't. There's too many variables. When I tested fuel mileage for years, I had 3 trucks. They all ran the exact same lane every day. Weather was pretty consistent because it was Florida and Georgia. So we didn't have a lot of weather issues to deal with things. When I tested a fuel mileage strategy or product, we would run all 3 trucks for 30 days with no changes to set a baseline. And if something happened during that time, like we had to replace tires on one of the trucks, you got to start over. That's a variable. So we'd have to get a solid 30-day baseline with no changes. Then I would make the change on 2 of the trucks and not make it on the 3rd. Now, these trucks run almost right behind each other all day long, out and back. I didn't make it on the 3rd, and here's why. There were times where both trucks that I was testing would show a 3 or 4/10 per mile gain during the 30 days of testing with no changes after 30 days of a baseline. They showed a gain, 3 to 4/10. Guess what happened to the truck with no changes? It also gained 0.3. So we know that we don't know what really happened here, but it probably wasn't the strategy we were trying. Maybe the weather changed a little bit. Maybe our trailers got a little lighter. It was off-peak season, that kind of stuff. So that's that. So trying to test this stuff was just out of the question. But I was getting all this feedback, and over time, most of it became negative. People didn't seem to like the biofuels. We seemed to have more and more problems with them. And then just recently, I had a situation where on a Mercedes Sprinter, it says right near the fuel tank, do not use more than B5. And all of a sudden, all the fuel stops around here are B20, and the one in town is B55, 55% biodiesel. And I'm freaking out because I don't want to put this fuel in this engine. But I had to. I didn't have a choice. The one day I kind of got stuck. So that's when I brought it up. And it turns out that, from what I gather, maybe you have some new information today, that the reason behind that isn't because they were worried about damage to the engine or the emissions. The reason behind it, and the reason it has to be officially put on the vehicle, is Mercedes can't guarantee they can meet the emission standards with more than B5. So it's kind of their get out of jail free card. This isn't our fault if you put this fuel in there. So that's when, I got more concerned about this. And if there's no damage to the engine or the emissions or no real danger of that, then I'm fine. I'll put it in there. But I found a good source for just straight number 2 diesel, so I'm going to stick with that for a while instead. But that was why I asked you, could you go out? You have the base knowledge of all these things to really understand it. And could you go out and help us figure this out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great story. But didn't you say that you got a dash light error
Well,
when you ran the B55?
no, it wasn't a dash light. So here is the interesting thing. I got concerned about it enough that I started really digging into all the menus on the dash. Like you can get
Oh,
deep
okay.
into the electronics on this thing, and I had never done that before. Well, I think it was
Okay.
just a coincidence. I find this gauge in there that I've never seen where it shows the percentage on the DPF. And I'm assuming it's
Right.
the percentage of, how clogged it is before it needs to do a regen. And we've never seen a regen light on this vehicle. I don't know when it does a passive regen. It's never done any kind of forced or parked regen. But all of a sudden, right after I put this fuel in and I'm concerned about it, on the second tank, I go in there and that gauge is up in the 94%. And I thought, oh no, is this going to be the problem? Well, then a couple days later, I go back and check it, and now it's at like 2 or 3%. So it must have done some sort of passive regen and cleared everything out.
Must have done an active regen.
Or active.
And cleared
Okay.
everything out. Yeah. Yeah. By the way, there's a Mercedes Sprinter van in the family, and runs great on the pump. What you get at the fuel pump, or I guess it can be up to 15. Plus the max mileage fuel burn catalyst runs great. Yeah.
That's the
I'm
other.
assuming you do the same.
Well, I wasn't, and here's why. I don't fuel this vehicle. It's my wife's vehicle, and she actually uses it as like her daily vehicle. It's the big 3500, but she uses it as her daily vehicle, and she loves it. It's a great vehicle, but putting max mileage in a small tank like that, we got to get down to a small bottle, and she's usually the one that does it. But I'm going to start putting the max mileage in myself. She can go get fuel, and then I'll put it in later.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, I'm glad you clarified that flashlight. It was you going in and checking the DPF gauge. I get it now. Okay. So it didn't necessarily correlate with any use of the B55.
Could have just been,
Okay.
I think it was just a coincidence. And one of the things that one of my other hosts on Friday, who's really studied a lot of this stuff, said when it comes right down to it, the biodiesel is actually less likely to clog the DPF because it produces less soot but more NOx. Right.
Yeah. And we're absolutely going to get to that. Yeah. So I'll start with some of the broad brush things. We'll just treat this as kind of like an open discussion of the basics of biodiesel blends. So I found 2 really good academic articles that were right in line with what I was looking for, and one was the combustion dynamics of a biodiesel, and the other was how do engines run? How do engines actually run? Any studies of either of those areas was what I was searching for, and I found 2 pretty good papers. By good, I mean they're notable scientific journals. That means that articles are published after extensive peer review. And so, generally speaking, it's good info. So you just can't pull it up by researching that same word phrase or key phrases on the internet. I have to go a little deeper, and this is something a librarian taught me years ago. Is if you open a browser and you enter Google Scholar into the search line, that will take you to a special search engine, which is just for searching the scientific literature. And then once you're inside of Google Scholar, you can enter the same keywords, and you get all these abstracts for relevant scientific papers published on that topic. So it's really good, handy thing to not have to go to the library these days to do this kind of research. I can just do it from my computer. Yeah. All right, so that's a little bit of background, but the broad brush is biodiesel is not all bad. It's a mixed bag of good and bad stuff. I can go into some of the details, and I will go into some of the details, but both papers came to the same conclusion that when you're talking about increasing the percentage of biodiesel in blended with regular diesel, the benefits max out at about 15%. And by the time you get to B20, you're kind of you're doing a little more harm than good in some respects. And I can go into those details. But I'm just going to back up and talk about why we just don't, when you add a biodiesel blend at the pump, it can vary in so many different ways chemically. And it starts with the feedstocks. So in backing up even a step further, unlike diesel, this is something that it's a chemically transformed product. So you start with long chain fatty acids, and they're reacted with either methanol or ethanol, and then you come up with the product of biodiesel, which is a fatty acid.
Can I stop you there for a second?
Ethyl ester or methyl ester. Yeah.
Since we're at the beginning and we're kind of defining terms, can you explain I've seen the term biodiesel, and now I've seen the term biomass diesel. Can you explain the difference between those, if there is any?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely do that. So biodiesel comes from, it's usually the feedstocks for producing those long chain fatty acids. It's oil and so the types that are out there are oilseed crops such as cottonseed, rapeseed, safflower seed, sunflower seed, linseed, palm seed oil. Those are household names, a lot of them.
Dr. J.
And
boy, this is going to be a long show today, but I got to jump in here right now because I get to combine two of my favorite things, my Tuesday and Wednesday show, Trucking and Health. So you mentioned rapeseed. Do you know what that is in the store?
No. What is rapeseed in the store?
Canola.
Canola. Okay.
Canola oil. Here's why.
Thanks. So,
almost all of it, and I still have more to talk about on this. So almost all of the canola, a big part of it, is grown in Canada. So that's where the word comes from. Canola. Like mazola is corn oil. Canola, Canadian oil, is really what that is kind of telling us, but it comes from the rapeseed plant. Here's the thing. They tried to call these, I'm going to jump on my health kick now because this is a good time to do this. They call all these things vegetable oils because we always think of vegetables as healthy. They're not vegetable oils. They come from seeds. They're seed oils. And they're highly processed with all kinds of chemicals like and not just to make biodiesel. They're highly processed with crazy amounts of heat and chemicals to make the oil that we put in our body. You should stop consuming all seed oils. They were originally designed as mechanical lubricants. They were never designed to be food in the beginning. They were developed as mechanical lubricants. And now we use them in food because they're cheap. They're horrible for us. It's one of the biggest pushes now is trying to get people to understand how bad seed oils are for us. And I will tell you, 99.9% of the restaurants in this country use nothing but seed oils.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's an evolutionary thing, but I want to kind of get through this and answer your question.
I won't interrupt you anymore.
Because I do have limited time, unfortunately. So each of those oilseed types that I mentioned, they're made up of different percentages of these long chain fatty acids. Some are branched, some have more oxygen than others, some have more double bonds, carbon-carbon double bonds than others. And most of us have probably heard of the term with respect to oils in our diet of polyunsaturated fats. And so polyunsaturated means it has multiple carbon-carbon double bonds. Anyway, the more branched they are, the more double bonds that particular oil contains, the more difficult it is to burn. And so each of those oilseeds has several of the different types of fatty acids, some being a high percentage of slow burners, some being a fairly low percentage of slow burners, and vice versa. So, the point is, you have to produce a biodiesel fuel through chemical transformation, that is, through a chemical reaction, to get it from a seed oil form, which is too viscous to burn, and it'll shut down the engine. So you cannot burn seed oils directly in an engine. They first have to be chemically converted by a process called transesterification, and that makes them less viscous, and you can now blend them with petroleum diesel and get something that's pretty good. But again, you can overdo a good thing. So at B15, the properties of that blend are still pretty decent, but by the time you go to B20 and higher, then some trade-offs do kick in. But that's different from the distillate fuel. Pure diesel is not chemically transformed. It's just been separated from the crude that comes into a refinery through heating it and driving off the vapor. So the easier to volatilize compounds, organic compounds, come off first in the distillation process. And so the first things that come over in a distillation column in a refinery are commonly known chemicals, butane, propane. And so just, our normal day-to-day intuition tells us that those things burn fast, right? And then as the temperature of the distillation pot goes up, then the harder to volatilize compounds start to come off. And let me pull up my reference here. And the next thing to come out is naphtha, and then gasoline after that. And the temperature continues to climb in the distillation pot. And the next thing to boil over into the distillation column is kerosene, which is also known as diesel number 1. And so remember, as each fraction of compound comes over, it's more chemically complex and therefore is more difficult to burn. So that's one thing that distillate fuels does have in common with biodiesel oils is that the more complex they are chemically, the longer the chain, the more branched the chain of carbon atoms, the more difficult it will be to burn, and that comes into the discussion later. So then after kerosene number 1 is, of course, diesel number 2, and then after that is the really heavy, dirty stuff that's, it's not necessarily dirty, but it's burned in heating oil furnaces. And then what's left behind it turns into waxes, oils, asphalt. It's not suitable for use as a fuel. It's used for other things. So, but anyways, that's kind of like a broad brush distinction between a biodiesel when it's in a petroleum diesel. One is distilled and the other is a reaction product. Okay, great. So now we're just going to talk about pros and cons of these biodiesels.
Okay.
So, there is an there is an ASTM standard for biodiesels, and it is called ASTM blah, 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 if anybody wants to know. ASTM D6751. And that would be the spec for the fuel spec for a pure biodiesel, or B100. And the reason I pulled this up is because I wanted to see if there was a specification for color of biodiesel, because I had a caller who left a message, and a listener who left a message, and he wanted to know, are biodiesel blends more yellow or orange in color than number 2 diesel, which he says is transparent but has a blue-green tint to it. So that was the reason for pulling up the spec, and unfortunately there's no color criteria given there, but
got it.
Did want to mention that.
So basically color probably tells us not much, right?
Not much, yeah.
Okay.
But the same listener said when I use the catalyst with number 2, the engine drives as if I'm using number 1. Why is that, number 1 diesel? I said, well, it's because the catalyst is improving the combustion directly of those harder to burn fraction of molecules that come in diesel number 2. And since number 1 is simpler molecularly speaking, it's easier to burn. And so, you can easily see why, if you compared burning straight number 1 kerosene in your engine feels like burning number 2 plus the catalyst, how the catalyst is definitely playing a role there.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Directly improving.
With a question.
Yeah.
So one of the things I always look at, because I've done all kinds of comparisons over the years, I've looked at propane injection and hydrogen injection. One of the things that always comes up is the amount of energy within a gallon of that fuel. Let's say we're comparing equal amounts, how much energy is actually in that fuel measured by BTUs. And number 2 diesel seems to be one of the highest by far, one of the most energy dense fuels. Is there more energy in number 2 than there is in number 1?
There is, but it's harder to access because it's slower burning.
That's where the catalyst comes in, though, right?
That's where the catalyst comes in.
Yeah. So
because, the energy is contained in the carbon-carbon double bonds, carbon-carbon single bonds. The more of them you have, which you get with number 2, the more inherent energy content is there. So it's just they're slower burning, so you're not accessing them because of the nature of the incomplete burn in a combustion engine. So
Thank you.
Reciprocating combustion engine. Yeah. So but that's a really good important point. So some of the pros and cons we want to talk about next. Long chain hydrocarbons are good, but you can never, if the chain gets too long or too branched, then it starts to slow down the combustion process, and you don't get as much heat content released during the power stroke.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's where the catalyst comes in, as opposed to generic fuel additives that change the properties of fuel. They may or may not improve combustion indirectly, but the catalyst is always directly improving the combustion characteristics of whatever you add it to, be it number 1 diesel, number 2 diesel, a biodiesel blend, gasoline, home heating oil, whatever you're adding it to, it's going to burn better with the catalyst than without, and release more heat energy as it burns.
Excellent. Good stuff.
Yeah. But so some of the pros of the biodiesel is it will improve the cetane number of a blend, and it will also improve the lubricity characteristics of a blend. So biodiesel enhances the ignition quality. That's by through the higher cetane number, and it also has a higher flash point, which means it's safer to handle and to transport and to store than regular diesel. The main disadvantages are it has poor or low temperature properties, and so that means the cloud point is lower, the cloud point is higher, the pour point is higher. So they can cause problems with plugging of the fuel filter in cold weather sooner than straight diesel. And that's always something to keep in mind. But that's not necessarily new news to me, but here, this actually is, and I'm just going to read it. In addition to density, biodiesel also has a higher viscosity, which generally leads to poor atomization of the fuel spray, affects the accuracy of the operation of fuel injectors, and inhibits the nebulization of fuel in the ignition chamber. So that is kind of like new information that I wanted to.
So, that's interesting. Am I also understanding this right? You had mentioned the biodiesels actually have more lubricity. That is the higher viscosity, right?
No, it's
No?
the impurities. It's the fact that you've got more oxygen-containing molecules. It's the fact that it's not as pure a substance because it hasn't been distilled. And some of those impurities are the reaction byproducts, such as glycerol or glycerin, which are going to help with the lubricity
Got it. Okay.
characteristics. So
Okay.
it's just inherently, more slippery.
Got it.
So yeah. Mm-hmm. But, it does have a different combustion dynamic. And so that leads to the next paper. This one sort of alludes to it. But so cetane number and ignition delay. There's a relationship between those two. And it's based on the molecular structure of the fuel, which, as we've already said, can vary all over the map because you've got so many different types of feedstocks, and that's not a uniform thing when it's all put together by the suppliers. But this high cetane number results in a shorter ignition delay. And that's what cetane improvers are designed to do. So you would think that is a good thing. But most people are reporting also lower emissions, as you mentioned.
Can I ask another question? Because I want to go back. Doesn't octane do the opposite in gasoline? Am I hearing this right, or am I getting confused about this? I thought.
Yes, octane is different. It's a different scale. It's a different test, and it's a different basis of the test.
Doesn't octane actually slow down the burn? And that's why when you use a gasoline that's too low of octane, you get the pre-ignition, the knock, because the fuel burns too fast or too soon?
It's too volatile, and so it can pre-ignite because it's too volatile.
Okay.
So, you want to control that vapor pressure up into the point the spark ignites, the spark fires.
I've kind of heard people kind of correlate cetane to octane, and it sounds to me like they're almost doing the opposite. That cetane in diesel is slowing things down. And do I have that backwards, or is that correct?
No, you're backwards.
You're back. It's best to think of them as kind of doing opposite things or meaning opposite things.
Okay.
Let me just read what. So we'll focus here on cetane, and I'll just tell you. I'm just going to read the test, and you'll appreciate this, I think, better if I just read the basis of the cetane number lab test. So fuels with a high cetane number will have short ignition delays. The primary reference fuels used for cetane number are cetane, which is an N-hexadecane, and it has an assigned cetane number of 100. So it's all normalized based on the cetane number 100 corresponding to that particular alkane, the cetane. And then the other end of the scale is the cetane number of 15, and there's a different carbon that correlates with the cetane number of 15. It's not. So cetane comes from the chemical name that's used to define the upper end of that scale, from 100 at the top to 15 at the bottom. So the higher the cetane number, the closer the fuel is testing toward the ideal, which is 100, has a assigned value of 100. Okay. All right. So the saturated, which means they're loaded with hydrogens, and the unbranched hydrocarbons and the long aliphatic chains all have high cetane number and good ignition ability as a diesel fuel compared to unsaturated or branched molecules. So I'm reading that, but I've already said it, so there you go. But regarding biodiesel components, two structural effects influence the cetane number. One is the skeleton of the aliphatic chain, its length and number of double bonds, and the nature of the alcohol, whether it's a methyl or an ethyl. And most of the stuff that's produced out there is still methyl, I'm afraid. Ethyl would be better hanging an ethyl on the end of the former alcohol moiety would be better. I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but that being the case, all ethyl esters all ethyl esters have a higher cetane number compared to the methyl esters. But so, that's just kind of an interesting side point. And so there's so much variability, and you can actually vary one end of the molecule. It can be either a methyl or an ethyl. You can vary the main chain of the molecule, branched, unbranched, double bonds, no double bonds, lots of oxygen, not much oxygen. So there's just a tremendous amount of variability in the biodiesel
It sounds
world.
like it.
But, yeah.
And that was one of the things we've been talking
Yeah.
about in the real world since biodiesel came out, is it just seems to be more inconsistent. Dr. Jane, I'm going to go back to the quote that I posted this morning, and the last sentence, I'm kind of feeling this right now. It says, learning creates more competence, but first it amplifies our feelings of incompetence. That's kind of what I'm feeling at the moment. Yeah, I'm feeling a little incompetent at the moment. But I get it. This is always, one of my favorite sayings from Anthony Robbins, of all people, was, when you are confused, it's a good thing. Keep pushing. You're about to make a breakthrough. And I've always believed that.
Make a breakthrough.
Yeah. That the more confused I am, the more I should probably keep pushing and try to understand, because there's a breakthrough here.
Well, I think we're going to have a little bit of fun with this next paper, which has more to do with the interaction of biodiesel blends. And they tested several of them at different percentages, with one particular diesel engine. So now I think we're going to be able to bring in our experts on the diesel engine side. So let me read how this test was done real quick. I hope I copied that. Yeah. Let's see. It was a direct injection diesel. Yeah, here we are. A comparative study of effect of different biodiesel blends. B5, B10, B15, B20, B25, and B50, and 100% biodiesel. The study on injection, spray, combustion, performance, and emissions of a direct injection diesel engine at constant speed, that's 1,500 RPM. That's all I know about the test engine, okay? But both papers come right out and say the emissions profile of biodiesel blends is better than burning straight diesel. So you do get lower soot and smoke, by quite a bit. You do get lower unburned hydrocarbon, which is good. You do also get, what was the third one? Lower carbon monoxide. But the thing that goes up is the NOx. And so in-cylinder temperatures tend to go up the higher the percent biodiesel. But, this is just one aspect of an engine dynamic as it varies with changes in the fuel type. So we're going to talk about two or three right here. One is called the penetration distance, and this is an injection thing. So the penetration distance, I think, they're talking about the spray. It increases with the percentage of biodiesel in the diesel fuel due to enhanced inline fuel pressure. So why does fuel pressure in fuel injectors go up when you increase the percentage of biodiesel? Now this is a good aha moment, and it ties into cetane and all that. And the reason is because the biodiesel is less compressible. So you don't have to push on it as hard. I mean, it pushes back, so it's less compressible. And so the same amount of force is going to result in a higher amount of pressure. And what that does is it pushes the spray out further. And if the spray goes too far from the spray nozzle, the injector nozzle, and hits the walls of the cylinder, then the liquid condenses on the walls and dribbles down the side, and it ends up not being burned very well. So that's what this test determined, was that the best spray penetration occurs at B15 or B10, and when you're at B15, you can't really go any higher in biodiesel without increasing the amount of wall wetting from the spray pattern, which works against the combustion.
Can I jump in here too?
Does that make sense? Yeah, Leroy and Eric?
Yeah, I want to jump in here, and then Leroy and Eric can probably comment on this as well. We go back in time, and we taught drivers for a long time how to never lug a diesel engine. And the reason you didn't do it was because the only thing controlling the fuel going into that cylinder was your right foot. The more you pushed on that pedal, the more fuel would be put into the cylinder, and you couldn't burn it, and it would wash down the walls of the cylinder and get past the rings and cause fuel dilution in the oil. And it's part of the reason. It's not the entire reason, but it was part of the reason why we used to change rod and main bearings at 250,000 miles, because they needed it, because we would have, I'm going all the way back to mechanical engines here. And we would get a lot of fuel dilution. It was hard on the bearings and the parts, and the engines just didn't last as long. Even into up until 2010, 12, somewhere around there, I'm not really sure when this started to change, all the machining and the ring designs changed. So the fuel that isn't being burnt now doesn't end up really in the oil. Just like the oil is not making it past the rings and being burnt. It used to be every diesel engine on the road burned oil. At some rate, it burned oil and you had to put some back in. We have diesel engines today that go 75,000 miles and don't use a quart. I mean, it's incredible, that change. So now that has to mean that when we have this wall wetting that you're describing here, that all of that unburnt fuel is going out through the emissions. It's no longer ending up in the crankcase, which is good. We don't want it in there, but we really don't want it in our emissions either. We want to burn all the fuel that ends up in the cylinder.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's exactly right. So, I mean, that's a great practical history of engine mechanics that most people can relate to. And it's also a fantastic testimony to just how much mechanical design has improved over the decades. I'm sure Leroy has something he wants to add.
Leroy, Eric, you guys jump in here if you've got anything. Or Bruce.
Fuel pressure good. Pressure make power like that. You get smaller fuel droplets, and it makes it more volatile. So it's kind of like adding timing. So it's good in some places and bad in others.
Okay, this is probably the time I can expand on what you just said, because I do fully understand it. The smaller the molecules, the more exposure they have to air, and they can encapsulate themselves and bond themselves with the air molecules on the mixture. And the more air fuel we have bonded together, the better the ignition we have, the more combustion we have.
Oh yeah, right? Always. But remember, there are two types of ways hydrocarbons can behave. There's the actual size of an individual hydrocarbon, but the long chains make them stackable, and they tend to be attracted to each other, so they end up spooning with each other, and that blocks the air, that impedes air getting in between each molecule and allowing it to burn to completion. So some of those additives out there that break up that intramolecular attraction, surfactants and whatnot, do actually work to do what they say they're going to do. Some of them do, anyway.
So let me add something. Oh,
yeah.
I'll add something. Eric, you're right. The finer the spray, the better. However, we did this years ago with the big cam. We were having injector cups custom made, and we were adding more holes, but making the diameter of the hole smaller. Like the average on a big cam is 0.008 in diameter, and we were going to come in at 6 and 5 and 5.5, and adding more holes, so you still got the same volume, but we were getting smoke. So as I sat in meetings in Columbus, Indiana with several of the Cummins engineers, they said the trick that you're missing, Bruce, is your spray is so fine, it's not traveling across the piston. So you have to make sure that the spray travels the entire diameter of the piston. And so you can only make it so fine because you need enough pressure to push it that if the piston's say 5.5 inches, you got to push it 2 3/4 inches each way. But,
Yeah. And without overshooting, though, I might add. So what they're saying here is that wall penetration happens when you're overshooting the diameter of the piston, and now you're just spraying the walls of the cylinder and kind of missing the piston. But
we spent a lot of money and a lot of time and energy to find out that the OEM still made the best injector cup.
Okay. Well, you learned something, so there's nothing wrong with noble failure.
That's right.
Noble failure. I like that one.
Yeah,
I had a lot of noble
good?
failures in my career.
That makes me feel much better about myself today.
Yeah, I'm going to make a note of that. Noble failure, like the knight in shining armor.
Yeah.
Your intentions were worthy. Your goals were good. You just didn't make it. Sometimes things just don't work out.
There you go.
It's part of life. Okay, so let me just review this to clear my head a bit. And this is really where it gets kind of interesting, because now we're going to talk about injection delay, ID, as a counter to dynamic injection timing, DIT. And this is something maybe Leroy has a lot more insight into, but I'm just going to read it here because this is so cool, okay? They have a figure that shows that the injection delay is lower with all biodiesel diesel blends than base diesel due to the lesser compressibility of the biodiesel, resulting in automatic advancement in dynamic injection timing. It results in an automatic advancement in DIT, dynamic injection timing. I'll go on. It continues. As the duration of injection delay decreased from 5.6 degrees crank angle with base diesel to 5.5 degrees, then 5.4 degrees, then 5.3 degrees, then 5.2, then 5.1, then 5 degrees crank angle with Bio 10, 15, 20, 25, B50, and B100 respectively, the DIT, the dynamic injection timing, advanced from 0.4 degrees crank angle before top dead center with base diesel to 0.5 degrees, 0.6 degrees, 0.7 degrees, 0.8 degrees, and so on with each incremental increase in biodiesel. So let's talk about that, Mr. Leroy. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
I mean, I'm surprised somebody was able to measure to such a precise 1/10 of a degree crank angle.
Yeah,
that's
an impressive thing.
Yeah,
what they have at the OEM level is they bore the hole down into the combustion chamber through the head, and they have a glass in there, and they measure the flash.
Interesting.
So it's photographic. Yeah, that would be very precise way.
Yeah, I've seen that out at Cummins back in the 80s and 90s. They also measure the amount of pressure inside the cylinder that way.
Interesting.
Well,
that's why you got to be careful when people start advancing timings. Too many of these truck stop tuners in shops that think they know how to set up an engine with an ECM, and they just want to keep advancing, they're drastically increasing cylinder pressures. And the OEMs measure that through boring holes in the head and putting sensors in there and running the engines on the dyno.
Yep. So everything is a trade-off when it comes to reciprocating engines, and so you can easily push things too far in any given direction, and it backfires in another.
It almost seems to be. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Leroy.
I just wanted to add the note was off of what Jane was saying, that everything changes, especially with ignition delay. You move one thing and then the other thing moves it the other way. Like EGR lengthens it, boost shortens it, fuel temp shortens it. If it's cold outside, you're moving your timing this way, that way, and that's why these new engines have so many different offsets for timing and fuel pressure. They control the amount of air because all these things change the volatility and the ignition delay. And you really don't want to have your combustion start to happen too early, because that's when you start to damage bearings. That's when you're getting, or too late or too much fuel, that's when you get wall wetting. So there's so many factors, and the ECM does a great job of compensating. I'm just wondering in the future if they don't do things like gas engines have, and they just have like a biofuel sensor, and then it's just another set of algorithms that can modify the ignition delay based off of a percentage of biofuel if they can detect that somehow. Like content. Well, they have like an ethanol sensor on a gas engine, but I don't know what you would measure on. Could biofuel. They measure? Yeah, that's true. The amount of French fry oil, like a little sensor. Like, oh, that's definitely oil.
We'll call it the McDonald's scale.
Yeah. Oh no, that's Wendy's. Oh man, you're cooked. Wendy's factor. You're done.
Hey, here's the big life lesson here. There is always a sweet spot and always a bell curve.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That more is not always better. In fact, it's almost never better up until a point. Then it starts to become worse. That's the sweet spot in the bell curve. I mean, it applies to so many things.
Well, the sweet spot is in a golf club, a baseball bat. All engines have a sweet spot.
Yeah.
And that's why the boost gauge and the exhaust gas temperature gauge and a great feel for a mechanical vehicle going down the highway helps you to find the sweet spot. And when you find the sweet spot, then you're trucking nice and the fuel mileage is great. The wear and strain on the truck is extremely minimal because you're at the sweet spot.
Hey, I just looked at the clock. Dr. Jane, how much more do you have?
I'm done. That's all I had, unless you guys want to go back and rehash anything that's I talked about so far. I could always do a little summary here of the pros and cons, which I don't think is a bad idea.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Right, and the reason I just realized, we're almost an hour and a half into the show. We haven't taken a call yet. It's been good stuff, but I think that might be the piece that might help people more now that we've kind of laid all the groundwork. Give us that kind of summary.
Sure. Most obvious advantages of biodiesel versus distilled diesel are, one, it's sulfur-free, so it's fully compatible with the catalytic post-emissions treatment systems. Blended with petroleum diesel, it enhances the ignition quality through a higher cetane number and the lubricity characteristics. And it has a higher flash point, so that's important for people who are handling bulk amounts of diesel or gasoline or biodiesel, as the case may be. Those are the main advantages. There are the disadvantages. The biggest one is the poor low temperature properties, such as cloud point, pour point, which can create problems in cold weather by plugging of the fuel filters, waxing, etc. And the higher viscosity of biodiesel, so it generally leads to poor atomization of the fuel spray, affecting the accuracy of the operation of the fuel injectors. So that's why you can't run a high percentage of biodiesel long term. It'll mess things up. But up to B15 to B20, just fine. Should be just fine. Okay?
So what you're saying is in the hot summer like we are right now, the B15 and B10 is good. But whenever it's 0 and below 0, it's not so good.
Right. And for a while there, a lot of the Midwestern towns were switching to B20 in the summer months only, because that's when they needed better combustion to reduce ground level ozone, and so the more oxygen in the biodiesel molecules. When you're adding more oxygen, you get lower emissions. So that's that. But it's a seasonal thing, or at least it used to be. Before I left Minnesota, the whole state was mandated at B20 year round. So, I mean, clearly things are always changing. I guess that's another mess.
Well, and we can't forget where I live, and I'm now dealing with B55. So my question to everybody on the call, because we have people here who understand the mechanics of the engine, who understand the fuel qualities, it was just described to us. If we were to take B55 and run it in, say, the Sprinter that says you really shouldn't go past B5, what are the damages that are going to occur?
I don't know, but I would always use the max mileage fuel-borne catalyst with your biodiesel blend, always. So the Flashpoint product is a good idea too, because it's got moisture management in it. It's got additional lubricity and cetane improver. I just think it's going to be a good insurance policy for any bad fuel or inferior fuel you might pick up in the biodiesel blend. And it's less stable. It doesn't stay in storage as well as regular diesel unless it's been treated with a stabilizer, which hopefully most of them have. But you just never know. I mean, there's so many variables out there. So a bulk consumer product. You just don't know what you're getting in every case. But, yeah.
Okay. So Bruce, Eric, Leroy, since you guys understand the mechanics of all this, can we kind of look out and see what the issues would be over time? And here's one of the reasons I'm thinking about this. If we buy a truck new, we control all the fuel that goes into it. But in our market, many of the people I'm working with are buying fleet trucks after the fleet's been done with them 4 or 5 years. Fleets have almost zero control over this stuff. If a driver pulls in somewhere and it's B55 or B75 or who knows what they're going to come up with, and they're just putting it in over 400,000 or 500,000 miles, and I'm looking at trucks on the secondary market. Can we figure out what kind of things are going to go wrong over time? What could I be looking for if I'm looking for a used truck, and I want to know, has this thing because this problem seems to be getting worse, or we're getting higher and higher percentages of biodiesel. 55% sounds crazy. Why are they selling this when there are vehicles on the road that say no more than 5?
I think it's just to meet the requirements for the emission standard as a manufacturer. I know when I sold power equipment, I worked for Shindawa for a little bit, and we were in the very beginning stages of going from 2-stroke to 4 strokes. And at that time, we were allowed to order X amount of 2-strokes based on the sales of our 4-strokes. And it was a criteria we had to meet. And I think this may be the same theory apply here, where if you get so many clean green credits, you're allowed to produce X amount of dirty credits. I think it's kind of a wash as far as that goes.
So nobody is aware of, really concerned if I were to just say, hey, look, the easiest place for me to get fuel is here in town, and it's 55%. And knowing I can put in the catalyst and the Flashpoint, I'm certainly going to. But again, I'm worried about people who aren't doing that. And then I get the truck. Is there anything we can figure out from all this information to say this is where the problems are going to be? If you use this fuel, too much of this fuel with too much biodiesel, here's the mechanical problems we could anticipate. Can we figure that out?
Yeah. Well, based on these articles, one possible thing to be aware of from long-term use of biodiesel is that it does increase the acid content in the fuel. It does have a greater tendency to cause corrosion. And so, again, if you have a supplemental additive that's got an anti-corrosion compound in it, that'd be a good benefit. And plus the water management package, because corrosion has to have water to happen. But going back to that fuel spec, I validated this other article that said it has a higher tendency to corrode. And it's right there as plain as day in the fuel spec when I looked it up.
Now, the one interesting thing here that I can kind of understand is it increases the acid content, which is why we talk about base in our oil all the time, because combustion creates acid byproducts. The acid attacks metal. We don't want that. We want our oil to stay base, not acidic. And we add base to our oil, but we're also back to the factor that the newer engines, you're just not getting that fuel into the oil to contaminate it as much as we used to. It's not even close anymore. So we're actually, you would think with more biodiesel use, we would need more base, but the new engines are now actually calling for less base in the oil.
Well, that's the crankcase exposure, which,
right,
as you said, newer engines is very, very limited. What I'm talking about is the fuel line and injectors and the fuel tanks.
Yeah, so now we have to worry about the fuel system being attacked by acids.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And the answer to that is the catalyst and the flashpoint?
I don't know. The Pittsburgh Power folks can tell me if flashpoint. I know it has a water management. It has a demulsifier, correct?
Correct.
If you're keeping moisture at bay, that's one essential ingredient for corrosion to happen.
Right.
You have to have water, air, and the acid. So there's a spec on the acid, and it's a pretty broad spec. So you never know how much is there. The best thing you can do is limit how much moisture can accumulate by using flashpoint. And if flashpoint also has a bit of corrosion inhibitor added to it, that's a good thing as well. So don't know if that's the case, but the guys at Pittsburgh Power should be able to look it up.
It does.
Excellent.
There you go. So,
excellent.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's a hand-in-glove fit for preventing problems, potential long-term problems that could be caused by constant use of biodiesel blends. And they're not going away. And it's like you said. I tried looking up where you could buy B50, and I didn't see anything come up on the internet. Just ask Google where can I buy B50, B55, and I didn't get any hits.
Got it.
But it could be coming. Yeah, I mean, right now maybe it's just an Oregon thing.
Well, Dr. Jane, you get an A+ on your homework this week.
Thank you. I had fun. I really enjoyed it.
Well, good.
I learned so much. I probably learned more than my audience, but you guys are great. Thanks for putting up with it.
Well, I'm sure you learned more than I did, but I'm working through it. So this helps. This will advance my education a little bit, and pretty soon I'll get it.
Well, hey, once this starts to sink in, if you have any questions, let me know, and we can keep talking.
Will do. Thank you, as always. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Take care.
Appreciate it. You have a good afternoon.
Eric Leroy, we're going to get to some calls, but what's on your mind today?
I just wanted to share a story we had on a truck in here last week. Lester Kavanaugh, who owns Kavanaugh Trucking out of Connellsville, PA, called me about a 2018 Freightliner glider they had with a Detroit Remand engine. Well, he thought it was a Remand. Driver complained about no jaking power. It was just really sluggish, lethargic. They've had it to 3 other shops over a span of 6 years. Nobody could find this problem. So I asked them for service records. We went over them. They checked the voltage to the solenoids, which is your first step on a jake issue, and make sure you have power getting to the electric part of it. The second step would be rebuilding the jake housings. And they said they've had them rebuilt twice now. So we were looking at it a little bit further, and the only logical thing left is the jake housing itself. And he was kind of a little bit caught off guard. And I wanted to explain why to some of our audience too. A lot of people think that, if you have power and you do a rebuild kit, what's left? Well, the housings themselves, because a jake housing has high pressure oil delivering through it to keep the pressure on the jakes. over time, that high pressure engine oil will act as an extrude hunter and actually bore out the passages. It still has the same volume of oil, but it loses pressure in there. And that pressure is what's going to keep your jakes going. So we replaced the jake housings, got the truck back to him. I get an email the next day from Lester, who's the president of Kavanaugh Trucking, thanking me and saying it's great. And then last night, we just received a Google review from Connor Stennett. And Connor is the driver of this truck. And I just like to share what he wrote on here. Quality work, reasonable labor rate, extremely knowledgeable. I drive a Coronado with a Reman 12.7 Detroit that had issues with the Jake since it was brand new. Company had it at 3 different shops that could never diagnose the issue. I recommended these guys, and I've always heard good things about them. They had the truck in and out within 3 weeks and fixed an issue that had been there for the past 6 years. Wholeheartedly would recommend them to anybody I know. So I want to give a thank you to Connor for the nice review, but it's stuff like this that sets us apart from other shops too, is we do the extra homework along with Dr. Jane Gates there, Leroy, Bruce, myself. We try to go the little bit extra mile for the people to try to diagnose the problems, because we do understand the basic mechanics of an engine, not just, okay, the computer says it's got this code, change this part. We understand what makes it work. Like, I bounce ideas off of Leroy every day, and I have to go to him for, clarification. Like, hey, how does this affect that? Where does the signal come from? And it's really refreshing sometimes that we can bounce stuff off each other and work through stuff like this, because it works. I mean, with reviews like this really makes us feel good. So
yeah,
just want to give a shout out.
That's an awesome review, and I appreciate that as well. And I'll add to what you just said as far as you guys going the extra mile. What you do here on the show, and how many years you've been doing this on the show, is a huge advantage over anybody working in a shop not doing this. You get to hear from people every day over and over, or every week here on the show over and over, about what's really happening, and things are brought up that we haven't seen before. And then what do? We go do the homework. We call people like Dr. Jane or people we know and say, hey, we're seeing this issue. Help us understand this. I made it when I first started on the radio. I'll go way back. I was basically brought on shows to answer questions about taxes. That was why I was brought on all the radio shows early on. Dave Nemo's show, the Midnight Trucking Show, Mark Willis's show on Sirius. I was the guy that they would bring on and say, hey, let's talk about taxes and accounting. And because I had the trucking background and owned trucks, I had some knowledge in fuel mileage and maintenance and some other things. But I made it a point that anytime somebody calls me and asks me a question and I don't know the answer, I'm going to go learn it. And, people will say, how can you answer questions about so many topics? Well, I've been doing what I do today every day for 17 or 18 years now. Longer than that, more than 20 if I go back to when I was a guest. And I was a guest on 3 different shows every week. It was like having my own show. But I made it a point. If I get a question, I don't know the answer, I don't care what it's about. I'm going to go learn the answer. And you guys do the same thing. You are exposed to a lot of different situations and questions and problems by being on this show, which I want to remind people, you guys take hours and hours out of every week to do this, and you don't get paid for it.
I even sometimes let it carry over at home, and my wife gets pretty mad at me. Trying to look, something will just pop in my head, and be like, "Oh, that's right. What was that guy? Okay, let me look this up," and I'll start going down a rabbit hole. And next thing you know, are you paying attention? Are we going to watch this movie? Or are you going to play on your phone all night? I'm like, oh yeah, sorry.
I know, but that is what sets you apart. It really is.
Well, she says I'm a nerd, but I'd like to think more of eccentric.
Yeah, there you go.
Nah, you're a gearhead.
Right.
A gearhead. You're a hunter gearhead.
There you go.
I'm definitely gearhead. Hunter, I'm not so great at, but I give it a try, but I'm just not, I suck at it. I just like spending time with my kids in the woods. Well, kids now. I got 2 of them that are going to start this year, I think.
There you go.
And I had one more quick thing. Give a shout out to Paul Carmine, because he's probably in the queue already. Howdy.
He is. He is.
He sent me a picture of his Dorothy cup, and those of them have been listening for a good long time remember the Dorothy soot traps.
Yeah.
And they did work, but with the catalyst, there was really no reason to pursue those. And his cup, he showed me a picture of, had 70,000 miles, and there was less in the bottom of it, I'm going to say, than 2 grains of rice in 70,000 miles. Absolutely amazing.
Wow.
I'm going to have.
Yeah, I can remember when we first started using the Dorothy and asking people to track it, and people were sending us pictures of how much soot they were dumping out of those things, and it was a lot. And we thought, oh, we found the answer. But then we found a better answer, because we're just like you were saying, we're never satisfied. If there's one more thing, let's go look at it. Let's try something else. Is there a better way? Yeah, and a lot of work was put into the Dorothy. And it looked like it was going to help a lot of people, and it did. But then we found a less expensive, more simple, and better way of doing the same thing. And then the cool thing was, just like you just talked about, we could use the Dorothy to prove it. If you don't run the catalyst, look at how much soot I get. When I run the catalyst, look at how little soot I get. It was a great way of proving the concept.
Yeah, I'm going to have Jordan make a social media post on this to show the pictures of it. And we also have a jug of carbon at our front counter from Bruce Storm, 120,000 miles. And it pretty much filled up like a quart bottle of carbon. And stuff.
Oh, man.
It's amazing how much is in there. And that was only, like, say, 1 year's time. And that was just the external EGR piping. That wasn't like what all got in the oil,
right?
What was stuck around the top compression ring, the valves. I mean, it's amazing what we just got out of the external piping. So I'm going to have some pictures up hopefully later on today about that.
Excellent.
And that's all I got.
All right.
Leroy got.
Leroy.
I was going to have a story about electrical problem that you brought in this morning.
The reverse lights?
Yeah. So Alex has been doing most of the electrical problems and wiring as we're kind of training him, but we didn't really have much to do, so JR and I went out and looked at it, and it really wasn't much of a story because we had it fixed in 7 minutes. So we went right to the plug that we were like, oh, I bet it's this plug, because it hangs out in the back. Like, it's a log truck, so it's really long. Yeah, it's really long, and the water drips down. The hydraulics leak all over this plug. Pulled the plug apart, and it just has like a black corroded wire, like in the pin connection. So we just like scraped it and bent the pin back down, and the reverse lights work. So I was gonna have a cool electrical story, but I guess JR and I have too much brain power to work on electrical problems.
Maybe I could make it a little more interesting, because I when I'm listening to the story, and I know this turned out to be something really simple, but many times electrical problems aren't simple; they're the opposite. But what you just described, even walking up to the truck and observing. It's this kind of truck. This plug is in this location. Weren't you doing the same process that we talked about in that book, How to Troubleshoot Anything?
Yeah. And then I don't know if that book also has a shortcut for when you have, like 20 years of combined experience between JR and myself working on trucks. We're like, it's that plug. We know what it is.
That's what I mean. In your mind, it happened instantly. But if we break down what happened, it really is how they describe to troubleshoot things in that book. And the more you troubleshoot, like anything else, the better you get at it. And it gets to the point where you don't even realize all the steps your brain went through as you were walking up to the truck.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we did a few small tests with like a voltmeter, and we put it in reverse, and we're like, oh, we have 12 volts, but it's probably corroded, it's probably not getting through. Let's clean it and see what happens. And yeah, that was that.
There you go. All right.
So when you talk about years experience, several years ago, I added up my years, Pete's, Brian Moan, our shop foreman, Pat Sharp, Pete's twin brother that does the pumps and the injectors, and Sean, our parts manager, added up all of our years of experience on the big cams. It was 168 years.
Yeah,
so I see advertisements for companies. We've got 15 years experience with this. I'm like, man, they're just getting started.
Rookies. They're rookies. Yeah. It's,
and that 160, that didn't count the newer employees. That was just the initial 5.
Yeah.
So.
Well, what a testament that those guys are still there. I mean, that's almost
Yeah.
unheard of today. In any industry, in any job, that's almost unheard of. So pretty incredible.
It's had 40 years or this year.
Yeah.
His 40th year was this year.
Wow. Yeah. Crazy. All right.
What was that, Eric?
Pat had his 40th anniversary year this year.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
40th. Wow.
All 40 years building fuel pumps, injectors, turbochargers. Used to do oil coolers, after coolers, oil pumps, but now it's mostly just pumps and injectors.
Wow.
And occasionally some turbos.
Yeah. Crazy. Crazy good. Let's.
Leroy.
Oh,
Leroy, I just sent you some pictures of a sensor that goes into a marine transmission. This happens to be 35 years old, and it's failed, and I need one of these for a friend. So take a look at your iPhone.
Yeah. Yeah, I got the pictures here.
Okay.
All right. Let's get to some phone calls. No, that's fine. We almost knocked out about 2 hours today without a single phone call. Let's go to Pennsylvania. Darren, what's up?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I got a couple of questions. I think I'll start with, the easy one first. So I have a 2013 Freightliner Coronado glider kit with a 12.7 liter Detroit in it. Actually had it at Pittsburgh Power there, got a dyno run on it, and I was thinking about getting it tuned, but I already had a tune that they said was really, really good, so I kept it. But my question is, I thought it has an aftermarket manifold, and then the Borg Warner, the 1702, I think is a number of turbo on it when I bought it. But I just figured out that the turbo is actually a Bully Dog performance manifold. Is actually a Bully Dog performance manifold, and I'm just curious.
Wait, hold on. Bully Dog's manifold and our manifold are identical.
Good. That answers my question. I was wondering if you would recommend changing to yours.
No, it's fine, man. They're using our manifold, so
that answers that question. Awesome. The next question I have is, my buddy just did an engine swap in a glider kit. He took a twin turbo cat out and put a 2005 cat, and he switched over to a 2005 D-Deck 5 60 series Detroit. I've never heard of them before, but I assume you guys are familiar with them.
A D-Deck 5 was the first year. Hold on. D-Deck 5 was the first year of the EGR engine.
So it does have
so
EGR.
Did he put a 12.7 or a 14 liter in?
It says 12.7 on the tag.
Okay.
They all do.
So it's a 12.
They
anyway,
all say 60-12.7.
Oh, they all say 12.7?
Yeah, on the top part of the tag. If you read down a little bit further, it'll probably say like 505 or 515 horsepower, and it should say DDEC Roman numeral 5 somewhere further on down the tag. But they did they made a 12.7 D-Deck 5 and they made a 14-liter D-Deck 5. The 14-liter D-Deck 5s were probably a lot more common today than I've ever seen. I've only seen a handful of 12.7 D-Deck 5s. They weren't real common as well as 14 were.
And you're saying the 14-liter would still say 12.7 on the tag up higher?
So yeah, I have seen some of those tags. It was like a generic family number or some kind of like agglomeration number is what they put on there, and I think they just mass printed them with 12.7s on them.
Okay.
I've never seen that. You have to point that out to me sometime.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out there for him. My question is, he was looking at turbos, and I told him he should do like the 1702 turbo like I have and get it tuned.
No, absolutely
okay.
not. If he has the 14 liter, absolutely not.
If it's a 12.7 liter, then what?
Then he's okay.
Okay, so he was looking online. He found a company by the name of Switchblade that makes a variable geometry turbo for supposedly 12.7 liters.
We know the turbo very well, and it has a flap in it. And
my question for
Let
that
me,
is,
here, I'm going to ask you a question.
okay,
The harder you accelerate, the more strain you put on your drivetrain, and the sooner you wear out your drive tires.
yep.
And if we have the engine tuned properly, and we're flowing exhaust and flowing in air with the fleet air filter, and we have our low restriction mufflers on, our acceleration rate is very strong. If you make it stronger, you just add more wear. So.
Okay. So the reason this got me thinking, so I'm all about fuel mileage. My 30-day average in my truck right now is 9.32, I think. So like I only run 57. I have 264s with a lift act, like 6x2 setup. And
Good.
when he said about that variable geometry turbo, it made me think about, am I right that Steve Crone has a variable geometry turbo in his engine?
Steve Crone is running our 14-liter variable geometry Detroit turbo, not a homemade one with a flopper valve in it.
Okay, and that's why when he
And
reminded
Steve
me of
Crone
it.
is running our program, and we were able to lower Steve Crone's 12.7 from peak torque at 1,400 down to 1,200 by programming the ECM and installing that turbo.
So would there be benefit from what I have right now in my truck to doing the same thing that Steve Crone did? Would I see any gains or no? I'm just curious.
Yes. Yes.
I would.
Yes.
So you lowered, so the tune I have, I ran it on your dyno. My peak, I have to pull the paper up. My peak torque is, I forget, it's between 1250 and 1350. So I think I'm a little higher than he is on peak torque on the RPMs.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just curious, like, would I gain power or lose a little bit of power because of that, or what would we look
Oh,
at?
you would never lose power dealing with us. So
Okay.
that's a mortal sin to us, is to take power away. But you will gain performance because you are going to a larger turbo, so it will flow more air, but yet it will give you a stronger bottom end, and you drive it appropriately, and you'll have the same power at 1,200 that you have at 1,400 currently.
Okay. Yeah, it was just because when I was there and got you guys to check it out, JR and Leroy was involved too, but I think JR did the main part of it, and they actually told me if they would retune it, they would tune it with less power, and I would lose fuel mileage because they wouldn't feel safe tuning a truck as high as what mine is right now. And that's why I was just curious if what's the difference between my truck and Steve Crone's truck, or what I would gain from
how
that,
many pound of, what's your total boost on a hard pull at 1,600 RPM foot on the floor?
Well, I just got your gauge. I have an electronic gauge, and it peaks out at 31.5 because it never reads any more than that on the scan gauge too. But I just got a mechanical gauge that I am going to hook up this afternoon, and then I'll be able to actually tell you how much boost I push. But I do not actually currently know. I just know it spikes right up. At 1,300, I'm at 32 already, and I can't. That's where it stops. So I don't know what I actually push.
So your homework is to call us next Tuesday and tell us.
I will do that. I know on the dyno, it dynoed out at 618 horsepower to the ground, and my peak torque was 2,034 foot-pounds of torque.
That's good. You said 618.
618. And I forget the RPM. I have the paper here, but it's not in front of me here.
Should probably make around 41 to 42 pounds of boost.
So he's at 727 horse, roughly. Now this is a 6x2, so it might be slightly higher than that. Let me do another calculation.
It was dynoed as a 6x2, if that matters any.
should be around 45 pound of boost.
Okay. Well, I'm really curious.
All right.
Like I said, I'm going to put the gauge in tonight, and I'll let you guys know next week.
All right.
All
Sounds
right,
good.
that'd be great. And if you want to think more and do that, do the Steve Crone conversion on the turbo, we can take care of that for you.
All right. Let's go to Minnesota. Matt, welcome to the program.
Hey, Kevin, Bruce. First off, I just want to thank you for bringing Dr. Jane on. She did a really nice job today. Learned a few things, which was good. The other thing is, I'm in a coaching class, and we had talked about back on May 2nd on my personal 12.7 Columbia. It's a glider. It's 2016 with a 12.7, and we had zero baseline because right when we bought it, we just started max mileage and flashpoint and air tabs and got it tuned, and
right
now we're 2.5 months later. We're 2.5 months later, and my 60 day is 7.9, and my 30 day is 7.7, and that's at 59 miles an hour, 1490 on the RPMs, loaded half the time at about 78,000 empty on the way home, and I'm just thinking that I should be doing a little bit better, like the mid 8s, high 8s, and I'm not
What
sure.
rear gears?
264.
So one of the
264.
problems that, and you kind of started off the conversation like this, we never had a baseline on this truck. And especially...
Correct. So that's why Bruce said, I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say especially gliders, because we know it's a rebuilt engine. We know we had problems with rebuilds at one point being done with the wrong parts. There were lots of issues. We struggled trying to explain to somebody why their fuel economy was so bad. We went through everything, and I would say, I don't get it. I don't know why your fuel economy is so bad. We've never had this happen before. We can almost always find the reason. And then after, I'll bet this went on for 18 months, almost 2 years, we finally, and it was Pittsburgh Power that figured it out. We're seeing parts that don't belong in these engines. So without that baseline, there could be that issue. There could be a driveline issue somewhere. We got to really start digging to find this. And I'll go back. There was a time where we would say, check your baseline, make an improvement, check your baseline, make another improvement, and it might take you a year of doing that to get all the modifications on a truck. And in the beginning, we would say to do that, I want to, and don't do 2 modifications at once because we want to know each one and what it gained. Well, after you do that enough, then it becomes, hey, wait a minute, we've proven this over and over and over. The fleet air filter makes a difference. The tune makes a difference. The aerodynamics make a difference. Oils, we'd go through all of it. And we'd go, we know this now works. So why not, if you can afford it, why not just take the truck and do all the modifications at once? It's the maximum savings. And it works, and it does make sense to do it that way. But if you get a truck like this and you look at it and you go, wait a minute, I should be doing better. Now we got to go back and kind of start at the beginning again and try to figure out why aren't we getting what you think you should get.
So do you have the low rolling resistance tires?
The tires are Bridgestone 726 ELAs, and I don't know what the rolling resistance is on those.
I don't know
Kevin?
anymore. Well, I used to. When we used to talk about rolling resistance a lot, I used to know almost all the popular tires for sure, but they change. I've never, did you say EAL at the end of that one?
EL, and then there's a small A
Yes.
after the capital EL.
I've never even seen that tire, and sometimes those designators after the number like 726 can change a lot of things. So I'd have to go look that tire up. One of the reasons we stopped talking about it a lot, more and more of the tires started becoming very low rolling resistance. So it wasn't as big of an issue.
Okay.
When we used to see some really popular tires at 150, and we had other tires down in the 90s. Now that's more than a half mile per gallon difference just on tires alone. We used to talk about it a lot. We
Yeah.
don't see many of those tires with high numbers anymore. A lot of the tires now are close enough that we look at things like wear and cost and other things. So I just don't know those numbers as good as I used to.
Okay.
I'm pulling up my chart on the 264 gear. You said your RPM at 59 mile per hour was like at 14.
That seems
90.
high.
1490 in
Yeah.
12th gear.
That seems really high.
In 12th gear.
Yeah.
And you have a 13 speed?
Yes, sir.
You should
Yep.
be in the 11th gear.
Unless it's a single overdrive.
Right,
But even, yeah, that RPM seems high though.
yeah, I'm almost in my chart. Just yeah.
Maybe not, because oh no, that's too many different comparisons to try to figure that one out. I was trying to think of my last truck with 390s in top gear on a 10th, which is 0.73. You're probably at 0.87. You have a number yet, Bruce?
Where? There.
I did run it in 11th on one trip, and it was like 1650.
That's
It
way
just
too
seemed
high.
Too high. It was,
That's way too high.
So
yeah, no,
at,
that was
at-
11th at 59.
okay, on Charlie Beisers, we did the 264s. At 62, he was at 1390. At 65, he was at 1464. And you're telling me at 59, you're at 1490.
Hey, Bruce,
So
hold on.
something's not
In
right
12th,
here.
yeah.
Hold on a second, Bruce. On Charlie's, what gear were we in with those numbers?
11th.
Direct. So now
Mhm.
this almost has to be a single overdrive, or we've got gears that aren't what we think they are.
Yeah.
He should be lower than Charlie's numbers, not higher. He's running in an overdrive gear. We think. Maybe he's not. Maybe he is running in direct in 12th.
Maybe it's it could be a old 14.613 speed transmission, being it was a glider. So we need to find that out. We need to make sure it's 264 gears. I mean, where do you run? Where's your run take you? What part of the country?
We run International Falls, Minnesota, just right on the top of Minnesota to Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's 501 miles, and it's just back and forth, back and forth.
It's pretty flat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not crossing the mountains.
No.
On the level.
Basically, it's all flat. On the level loaded, you're running anywhere from 2 to 3 pounds of boost. On a little rise, you might get up to 7 or 8. There's 2 little hills. I mean, if you want to hammer it on the hills, you can get 32, 31 pounds of boost. If you just take it easy over, you're at 19 or 20. And the pyrometer, now that when it first got tuned, I mean, the pyrometer was all over the place. So now that I pay attention to it, it's sitting around 900 to, that's maybe max. And on the level, it's at about 650 to 700, seems like, or lower.
Well, everything sounds right to me. I mean, this sounds good. 2 to 3 pound of boost.
Yeah.
This should be higher on fuel mileage.
Yeah, that's the only confusing part. And we had talked, Bruce, and talked to Leroy too, about the tune being too hot. And you guys suggested to run it and see. And it's like I said, it seems good watching the gauges. I'm just shocked that, especially being empty half the time, that I'm not, quite a bit higher. Now we just had the guy that called in a second ago, and he has a 12.7 with Coronado, I think he said, and he's at 9.2. But he's got a lift axle, right? So that helps.
Well, and trying to make those kind of comparisons will just make you crazy. Because again, I
Aren't
talked
fair.
about
Yeah, that's not
80
fair.
variables plus that could all be different. Driver can be 30%. That's a huge difference. So
Sure.
I try to tell people, look, it doesn't hurt to learn about other trucks, hear about what's going on with them, but don't try to correlate it. You'll just make yourself
Yeah.
crazy. We should just focus on your truck and work through things as we can to try to figure out why. Because I'm with you. I think it should be better. I think you may even be missing like a
Yeah.
mile per gallon somewhere.
Yeah, maybe.
I'd like you to jack up the differential and put the marks on the tire and the drive shaft and verify that it's 264.
Okay, I'll have to have my.
That's a good
my
start.
or my brother can do that when I get back on Friday.
Hey, has anybody tested
even
the
if
charger cooler?
No, not since we got
You
it.
could have a half mile per gallon loss right there, and you probably do. I mean, it's very, very common to have them leaking.
Okay.
Have you done an oil sample?
Yeah, this has had 2 oil samples, and they're, from what my brother said, and then the shop said everything looks good. It looks really good.
Hold on.
For the age of it.
Do you have access to those samples? And here's why I say that. Even the labs go by their scales. We flag this number at a level 2. We flag this number at a level 3. They have all their rules. What we've done on this show for years is we go way beyond that. They're looking for the big, obvious problems that most people would care about. We're looking at, why is your soot level 0.9 when most Series 60s we can get to less than 0.01? And soot is an indication we're not burning the fuel completely. You'll never, ever see that flagged on an oil sample. And the average person looking at it will read the description, look at the number, and say, nope, everything's fine. We use it to really get down to the nitty-gritty about fuel economy. So that if you can get me those samples, I can take a look. Maybe there's a clue in there. When was the last time the overhead was set? Do we know?
No, I don't know that. But well, I shouldn't say that. Right when the truck was pulled in, my brother had the engine apart and fixed a couple little oil leaks, and he might have done overhead then. So I'd have to ask him when I get back to town.
You'd have to. I mean, those are 3 things on a truck we don't know anything about that we should always do: pull an oil sample, test the charger cooler, and set the overhead.
Okay.
So I would start there.
I mean, as far as going from the boost gauge and the pyrometer with the RPMs that it's at, that all sounds correct as far as how the engine's running. It sounds good. It feels good. So we just need to look into these other things, then, it sounds like.
Yes.
It sounds like your RPM is too high to me.
It does.
Sounds like
something's wrong on that.
120, 125 RPM
Too high.
So
I agree.
That's what we need to verify.
Okay. I could do it. Because when I drop to 13th, it's like 1275, 1300 for RPMs.
That is almost perfect.
59.
That's almost perfect. That's where that engine
with the
runs.
12.7?
Yeah, absolutely. 1300, it runs really well. Now, when you hit a pull, you're going to drop a gear pretty quick, or a half a gear. But even heavy, most of the time, you should be right around 1250 to 1300. It's a great place to run that engine.
Okay, because I can do, change the test, if you will, then for run a month like that. It just seemed like when I did that, the turbo was flying all over.
Well, you're going to see a couple differences. When you go lower RPM, you can see more boost.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that
pyrometer runs way up too. Then
it does, but it's not what I wouldn't say way up. It's not going up into the danger zone, and hotter is more efficient. So we're pushing some limits at those numbers, but that's where the efficiency is.
Okay.
Try it for a trip and let us know. Just one trip.
Yeah. Do you have a?
All right, I can do
that. Do you have a scan gauge?
Yep.
Okay, so you should be able to get pretty quick feedback on just a trip how well it's working.
Yeah, and then the fuel gauge refill every trip, so it'll
Perfect.
we'll have an instant there too.
Perfect.
So.
That's even better.
All right. Well, we'll see.
Ask your brother if he set the over. Ask your brother if he set the overhead.
Okay. Yep.
And get him to jack up the back end, and let's see if it does have 264s. Okay.
And then.
Okay, that sounds good.
If we're giving you all kinds of homework, you got to do an oil sample, you got to test the charger cooler, make sure the overhead's been set, check the rear end differentials, and if you can get the model number of the transmission, that would help.
Okay. All right.
All right.
And you wrote that down as you're driving, right?
No. I'll just make a mental note, and then when I stop here, I'll try and remember. Or I could just listen to the playback.
There you go. That's the beauty of the app.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. All right, perfect. We'll look forward to hearing back from you on that one. Let's go to Texas. Paul was in the queue. Good morning.
Y'all have been waiting patiently. Howdy.
Howdy.
So I decided I'd clean Dorothy out, but I was pretty confident that it didn't need cleaning out. But all I have to do is undo one clamp with a 7/16 nut on it, so it's like a 10-minute job to take it out, clean it, put it back together. So in the last 120,000 miles, I wouldn't have filled a teaspoon with the soot that comes out of Dorothy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then just, even though it's dirty on the inside, I tipped a little bit of soot out on the ground, and then just squirt it with brake clean and wipe it with a paper towel, and it looks like a polished up chrome bumper on the inside. So, or stainless steel bumper, actually. Yeah.
And we say that the max mileage fuel-borne catalyst burns between 60 and 70% of the soot. I don't know. According to Dorothy, it's burning about 98%.
Yeah, well, every 25,000 miles, that cup used to be, I'd scrape it off with a pocket knife. It was just about full all the way. So it would be an inch and a half. You poke your finger down in the middle. It was an inch and a half thick around the outside. And the more I've used it, just the cleaner it gets all the time, I think. So, but I did have a couple of codes that come up last week. So I thought the truck was running a little bit poorly last week. Like it didn't seem to have the boost at the low end. Well, one of the codes that popped up was SPN 641 FMI 9, and then it said turbo actuator. And then the other code was SPN 1209 FMI 2, FMI 2, and then it said exhaust gas pressure, but that code is gone this morning when I started up, but I still got a code for the actuator, but it seems to be running fine today. I guess I'll probably need to make an appointment, do my annual visit, get it checked out.
Well, the employees love to see you, so I think it's your accent that makes them smile.
Well, see, when you were talking before about people that call and they want all the answers, but they don't want to spend any money. So I've had a Caterpillar and a Cummins engine rebuilt there. 09 was the Caterpillar and 18 the Cummins. And I pretty much go up there at least once a year, but sometimes 2 or 3 times if needed. Because I'll be honest, I don't really like anybody touching my engine besides Pittsburgh Power unless it's, oh, well, I'm here, I've got to do this. But I'll just try and get by with the minimum, and then I'll come up to you guys. because the trip was worth it. The service is good. You're in and out. And I'm pretty sure since 2009, Eric could probably look it up. I'm pretty sure I've spent well over $100,000 with you, so that's why I get good service, because I bring good money.
Hey, Paul. I just checked our records. Yeah. You need to share a little bit more this way.
Yeah, I haven't spent nowhere near that much with you. But
You haven't.
I did spend like 400 there.
Well, we appreciate it. So. We appreciate it.
Yeah, so you just give so much of your stuff away for free.
I know. I'm just a nice guy like that.
I'm helping build your audience. I keep sending people your way.
You do. I appreciate it.
What on Kevin's nutrients or food, which products do you buy?
I buy Cardio Miracle. What's the Light Balance? Cardio Miracle.
Hey, Paul, on the Cardio Miracle, did you get the new one in the pouch yet? The new formulation?
Yeah, and I tipped it into the old bucket.
Okay, and you're okay with the taste? We're having him on tomorrow because everybody's freaking out about the taste again. So we got to go through this again.
I think I like the taste better on the new one.
I do now too.
The first time I had it, it's like that's different.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell did they put in it? It's got something different in it. And but I've kept using it, but I actually think it tastes better.
I do too.
So,
took me a little bit, but I do too. And I now squeeze an entire lime into mine. The lime goes really well with the vanilla. Yeah, works good.
I'm already a limey.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Perfect for you.
Apparently.
All right.
Yeah, so.
All right. Good stuff. Hey,
wait. How can Paul be a limey? He's from New Zealand. English people are limeys.
He's actually a Kiwi. Isn't that right? Don't they call? I think they call New Zealanders Kiwis. Pretty sure that's what it was. It was
probably of English descent.
It was I think everybody down there in that part of the world. England sent all their prisoners down there. That's how Australia got started, and then I think they migrated. They swam over to New Zealand. Yeah, so I think you're right, Bruce. It was the British sailors who were called limeys because they would take limes to avoid scurvy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, we need to take a deserted island and take a lot of politicians out of Washington, D.C. and put them on there and say, make your life happen because you screwed our life up. So.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Hey, before we go on to calls, I want to talk about an article I just read. And I hate to say this because it's from Overdrive, and I have a lot of respect for Overdrive as a magazine. I worked with them for years and years. I know a lot of people still over there. This may be one of the worst articles I've ever read. It's about fuel economy and a natural gas engine. What I mean by horrible is there's no facts. There's all kinds of weird sentences that I can't quite figure out what they're referring to. But listen to the end of this. This makes me crazy. They're talking about a new Peterbilt 579 with the Cummins new X15N natural gas engine. It's the engine. I swear this had to be all bought and paid for by Cummins, because it's nothing but a fluff piece with no real data in here. It's the engine maker's latest and greatest natural gas engine, and just one of 3 engines in the company's new fuel agnostic platform. The CNG power plant features greater fuel efficiency than its predecessor, the ISX12N, and it's lighter than its X15 diesel counterpart. Well, that's kind of confusing. We're comparing a 15-liter to an older style 12-liter, but you don't give us any numbers. You just say it has greater fuel efficiency. It's lighter than the X15 diesel. I think that's because you can take a lot of the after treatment off. But then they say Peterbilt has fully integrated the X15N with the 579 powertrain with a range of up to 800 miles. Okay, well, just about every diesel truck on the road has a range way bigger than 800 miles. So why are we talking about that like it's something amazing? How does it drive? Where did I find that sentence? I want to make sure I read this because it was a quote. And I can't find it now. Somewhere it said, and the most important factor, it sounds just like a diesel engine. Come on. Go ahead and report that it sounds like a diesel engine, but please don't tell me that's the most important factor here. I'd like to know some things that really matter. Like how much horsepower can we get out of this? How much torque? What is the fuel economy? What is the weight? Because they compare it to the X15, but they don't really tell us any weights. Now, somewhere in here, this is the first engine that comes out of that family, and it's a great improvement over the 12-liter. There's better fuel economy, so about a 10% increase in fuel economy over that old engine, but they don't tell us the fuel economy of the old engine. So why tell us there's a 10% increase? It's a meaningless statement. Again, it sounds to me like a fluff piece that Cummins paid for. So now we get down to some details. The new X15N can go anywhere from 400 to 500 horsepower. Leroy, do you think you might be able to fix that?
No.
No? Okay. And 1850 torque.
I don't know.
Now, listen to this. They never gave us any numbers about real fuel economy. They give us 0 numbers about fuel cost. I have no idea how much natural gas costs. But here's what they say. Actually, this truck does go pretty far. It has a 175 diesel gallon equivalent tank, so it could go, almost 800 miles or something like that. Who the hell wrote this? A 4th grader? So it could go, almost 800 miles or something like that. But then if I did the math, that's 4.5 miles to the gallon.
I don't know if that's better than the current generation.
It claims it's 10% better than the old X12N. 10% better, so we could do the math. The old one got 4 miles to the gallon.
Yeah, well, based off what you've read so far, it sounds like somebody found a press release from Cummins and then just decided to turn it into a whole article.
That's exactly what it sounds. You're right. That's exactly what it sounds like. Like they took a press release and then wrote this article from it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fluff in there. Yeah.
Oh, it's awful. Unbelievable. All right, so we're going to get back to calls.
Years ago, there was a guy that wrote some articles. I think he's passed away. And the one was on fuel mileage, and you and I were working on fuel mileage, and he wasn't very specific. And his last sentence was, if you want fuel mileage, you'll get it.
Yeah, I found that
And this was in Landline magazine, and I thought, if you want fuel mileage, you'll get it. No, that's not necessarily true.
No, it's not. You got to work for it, and it's not easy. We talk about it all the time. I found this sentence, so I want to make sure I quote this. Here's the sentence, quote, but how does driving a Peterbilt 579 with a natural gas engine compare to driving a diesel 579? Well, the most important part is it sounds like a diesel. Really?
That is the most important thing.
That's the most important thing, according to this article. It sounds like well, if that's the case, I want it to sound like an old 2-stroke Detroit, because I really like the way those sound. Can they do that for me? Maybe it'll be like a Tesla, and we can just buy recordings of how we want our engine to sound and play them through the speakers instead.
And here's another problem with that. The new diesel engines are quiet, and people that are going from the older cats and the older big cams or 60 series, 14 liters, 12.7s, you could hear them roar and come to life. In the new ones, you don't hear that roar, and you miss that roar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
All right, there's my rant for the day. We're going to get back to the calls. Let's go to Tennessee. Rob, welcome.
Hey, Kevin, I have an ISX 15. The most important thing you need to know is this sounds like a diesel engine.
Yeah, this article might claim that yours sounds like a natural gas engine. I don't know.
I don't know, maybe, but I know it wasn't AI that's writing this issue I've got going on here. I've got some codes going on here that have been going on for a while. I've been getting the EGR cooler efficiency codes and EGR high temp. I've been inside that EGR cooler before, washed out a couple times. There's nothing in there. I run the catalyst religiously. I also run the flash point. Got inside the EGR valve, thinking maybe that was sticking. Clean in there, everything works smoothly. Changed all those sensors. Everything's good. So I'm wondering, do I just have an EGR? You know, it is an aftermarket EGR cooler. Is it just not as efficient as maybe a different one might be, or should I be looking maybe at injectors that are losing their spray pattern, and maybe it's still burning, getting in the exhaust there, and it's causing it to get hot? Or another.
So you said it's an EGR code.
I can throw in, yeah, it is a code in the computer. I keep getting it for EGR cooler efficiency and then EGR high temp. And I can tell when it's going on because, you know, what's really bad, it'll back down the power. Sometimes it'll get so bad I can only get 20 pounds of boost out of this. And, you know, normally when everything's working correctly, I can get up to 40 pounds boost and the thing will move pretty good. And another
you happen to have
factor
oh,
go ahead.
Do you happen to have a pyrometer?
I do not have a pyrometer. I probably pull one up on the laptop. It would have in there. I actually do have a pyrometer. I haven't installed it yet, but so that's not doing me any good.
And do you have some sort of like a scan gauge or OTR tool or anything like that?
It would just be a laptop. I have the remote tune set up on a laptop here. I just
okay.
I can pull up JPro and I can pull up some gauges that way.
What does the EGR temp do?
That I don't know. I never had it up when it's doing that there.
Oh, okay.
Now, would a ring pack that's wearing out, would that have anything to do with this here? This is the ISX that the ring pack's wearing out prematurely, and I know that from the oil samples.
No, typically when you're going to get EGR cooler efficiency codes, that's what it is, right? EGR cooler efficiency.
Yeah, that's what it is, and it's always predictable when it happens. You know, usually if I'm lighter load and I'm easy on the throttle, it's fine. But if I leave my foot in it too long going up a hill, or you know, especially if it's a hotter day here, that's when the light in the dashboard will go on, and I'll see the you know, boost start backing down if it gets real bad.
Yeah, so I mean that's just measuring the calculated exhaust manifold temp and then the EGR temp that's coming out of the EGR cooler, and you're supposed to see like a 90 to 95% drop in temperature. So when it doesn't see that, that's when it throws that code. So I would be suspecting the EGR temp sensor first because you've already said that you replaced the EGR cooler. Now you said it is an aftermarket one, and I would guess that the aftermarket one works as well as the OEM one, or you have too high a pyro that would cause that EGR temp code as well. It's either too hot going in or too hot coming out. If it's too hot coming out, it's probably a sensor issue. If it's too hot going in, it could be about a million things.
Yeah, I've replaced all those all the sensors, all the ones around the EGR valve, and on the other end there, pretty sure all of those have been replaced. Would a tune have anything to do with it? I have JR's tune in here. 550 and 2000 on this.
Yeah, that's the going in part. I would want to make sure that your calculated pyro temp wasn't going too high, because that would also throw off that threshold.
Okay. So it
sounds like you have a remote tune kit that we can just hook up and check it out. But
got it. I might hook it up here going down the road and pull up those gauges and just see what's showing me here for EGR in and EGR out.
yeah, I think there's even a parameter for like EGR cooler efficiency, and you can see what it goes to, or what it falls to, I should say. That's a pretty rare code. I don't see that very often.
Yeah. Now, if it is running high, is that could that be something like injectors? My thought is if it's losing the spray pattern on there, maybe it's not burning completely in the cylinders. It's getting out into the exhaust manifold and continuing to burn there. I could see that bring up the temperature. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, well, that's true. You would probably get other codes before that one. The X15 ECM is pretty sensitive to its injectors. What year did you say it was?
2015.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a 15, so it doesn't have the auto trim injector, so it's not as sensitive as the new ones. But I would suspect you would get other codes first before you would get before you'd have bad injectors. But it's definitely a possibility. I'm not going to rule it out.
Okay. The only other code I get on very rare occasion is for high fuel pressure. Saying I have a self-pumping condition, and the only thing I can think that would cause that is if I'm on the throttle hard and come over the top of the hill and let off too fast, injector stop firing, but it still has that high fuel pressure in there. It's the only thing I can think might cause that. I don't know if that's a factor.
Yeah, relief valve, things like that. Yeah, some sort of fuel system malfunction.
Okay. All right. I guess I guess I'll get the laptop on it and start watching temperatures and go from there. Maybe I can figure out something.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
All right.
All right. Thanks for the call. Let's go to Pennsylvania. Darren, welcome to the program.
Hey, I'm back again. I figure you guys aren't working long enough today. So, that guy called in. I called in earlier and was asking about turbo for a Detroit 12.7 liter. Anyway, I've my 30-day is 9.32. Anyway, the guy I think after me, or a couple calls after me, had called in. I think he's from, I don't know, up north, and he's wishing he could get better fuel mileage than what he's getting with his truck. And he said that he has 264 gear ratios, but the RPMs weren't lining up.
That's correct. Go ahead. That was the fellow from Minnesota.
Minnesota, yes. I have 264s in my truck, and at 59 mile an hour in 12th gear, I'm at 1150, and he said he's at 1490. So I think RPMs sound like when I bought this truck, it had 358s in it, and his RPMs line up pretty much identical to that. So my guess is he has 342s or 355s, I think. But I'm not sure. That's what it sounds like to me anyway.
Yeah, something wasn't making sense.
Anyway,
we need more details on that one.
So what he was saying in 13th gear, he's at 1290 or 1300. So I ran my truck before, I run 57. Before I did the gear change, I ran my truck there all day long at between 1250 and 1300, 56, 57 mile an hour, and I lug it down to 1150. And I gained like 2.5 tenths when I switched to 264s and switched to a 6x2 at the same time. So honestly, those gears, they're hurting him at some point, but if he would, for now anyway, I would say drop it into 13th gear and run that 1300, and I think that's going to help him quite a bit from being up there to 1490, because that's what I did, and my numbers were still in the high 8s back before I switched over to the 264s. So, and I just want to do a full disclosure too. So I have really good numbers, but I'm the guy that hauls pallets. So I run one-way loaded, one-way empty, and I do not run cruise, and I don't run hard. I don't worry about keeping all that much speed on the hills. I slow down quite a bit on the hills, and I use the force going down the other side to come back up. So there's probably not a lot of people that drive softer than me. So that's just a full disclosure on how I do get my numbers, I guess. I just wanted to be upfront with that, which I think I shared that other times on the show. So I do run half my miles empty. So anyway, that was what I had.
All right. Thanks for the call. Let's go to Ohio. Randy, welcome.
Hey, good afternoon. Talking about that single overdrive 13 speed, I've got a double overdrive 10 with 264s. Would there be much gain in going to 13 speed to single overdrive? I know it would drop the RPMs quite a bit and make that
hold on.
Useful.
Hold on. The transmission change you're talking about will make no difference whatsoever. The final ratios are the same. It's just they have.
Yeah, but this is.
Go ahead.
No, a single overdrive, the RTO 13.
Correct. The final gear 13th in both those transmissions will be identical. The difference will be you only have one overdrive gear 12th, and then direct is, wait a minute, you're on a 13, right?
Yeah, the direct would be the same, but the 13th is a point. On the 13, it's a 0.87 overdrive.
Your 13th is 0.87.
No, I'm considering going.
Hold on, guys. That's the old 14-6-13 transmission, single overdrive.
Yes.
So you want to go to a double, so you get down to 0.73 or 4, either one.
No, other way around. I want to go from the double to the single. I want to go to that one.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You already have that gear in your transmission.
He's got a 10. Okay. He's got a 10, so he's 0.73.
Yes.
Boy, I am confused. I heard something completely wrong. All right, start over.
I currently have a 10-speed.
Got it.
And yes, ninth gear is direct, and the overdrive is 0.73. I want to put the 14613 in, where 12th would be direct, and 13th 0.87.
Okay. My take on that. Is there anything wrong with the transmission you've got?
No.
Then I can't see how you can ever cost justify it. Even if it makes an improvement, and it might. Have you done...
doing the work myself.
Okay, what's it going to cost you then?
I found a used one for 15. Probably add another 1,000 on top of that for extras. Just to make it that overdrive useful, because right now overdrive is useless. I'd have to do 75 miles an hour.
What else have you done to this truck for fuel economy?
Pardon?
What else have you done to improve fuel economy on this truck?
I've got this is an N14, so it's a glider. I've got the exhaust manifold. I've got the air filter. I've got the muffler. I've got 264 gears. Everything I can, balancer, dampener.
If you've done all of those things,
gain a whole lot.
And that's so it will make it more drivable. So that's an advantage. If you can get it done at 2,500 and you're going to keep the truck a while, we might be able to cost justify it, and only because you've done so many other things already. If not, I would have told you to go do those things first. How about a tune?
Yeah, I got their tune in there.
Okay. Then if you can do this at a low enough cost, then it might make sense.
Okay, overtime. And I was just curious if there was an efficiency loss between those two transmissions, the difference. Are they both similar? I'll still run the 13th in direct, but occasionally I can use that overdrive.
Correct. Right. Yeah, Bruce, you know,
There's
is
both
there a
twin
big difference
countershafts, and they
between
use the-
those two transmissions?
The single over 13 versus the double over 13.
double over 10, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. If he has a good single over 13, I think he'd be okay.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it. I'm just trying to figure out if it's worth the cost. And
Yeah,
if you keep the cost down low enough, like you've said, then yeah. I mean, normally if somebody calls me and they want to go change transmissions, we're talking $7, $8, maybe even $10,000 these days.
Yeah.
But if you can get it done at $2,500, then it might start to make some sense.
Yeah, I'd be doing it myself. So I might just buy it, set it on the side, and see if I get ambitious enough to do it.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I was just kind of curious about if they were both the same type twin counter shafts and no efficiency loss that way in those two transmissions. They're both the same design and turning the same amount of gears in overdrive then, kind of thing.
I wouldn't say that, but we don't build transmissions, so I can't answer that.
Okay. All right. I think I'm gonna pick it up and set it aside and see if I do get to it one day.
All right. There you go.
Thank you.
All right, we have we've got Gerald in Missouri who sent me an article about biofuels. And Gerald, go ahead. What do you got here? Because I'm a little concerned about the article you sent me.
Right. Yeah. We was talking about the biofuel, and I heard about this. It's that veggie ram system. So it basically converts. Go ahead.
Well, here's what I think we're talking about, and I was going to bring this up with Dr. Jane, this topic, because it was kind of a big thing way back when people were producing their own biodiesels. And this was becoming kind of a big thing back then, and it just totally disappeared and went away. Here was my understanding of these fuels. My understanding, and you're looking at a new system now, so maybe this changes things. I might have to go do some more homework. My understanding was if you went around to restaurants and collected all their used vegetable oil and you converted it to a biodiesel, that you could not use that fuel to start the vehicle. They had a secondary tank, if I remember right. They had a secondary tank with diesel to start it, get the engine temperature up. And then once you got the engine temperature up, you could burn the biodiesel. To me, unless you're talking about maybe an old mechanical, big cam or something, I think I would stay as far away from that kind of an idea as I could possibly get. It just sounds...
Well, it takes it to the next level that it just runs off of straight cooking oil. So you just put the used oil in it, and it's supposedly supposed to run.
Well, right. And maybe it does. But what are we talking about as far as problems in our emission system? How efficient is it? How much power do we lose? I mean, there's so many questions about this. When we went through this before, almost everybody gave up on it. I mean, at the beginning, it's like, oh, you can make all your fuel for free. Well, if it was that great, people would still be doing it.
Everybody would do it, yeah. No, but I just wanted to get your...
Now, what they say here is they are specifically designed for the Ford PowerStroke 7.3 N6 liter and Dodge Cummins 5.9. They don't talk about which version of emissions. Can I run this on the newest versions of these engines?
Mm-hmm.
You can.
Yeah, and then what would that do with the big engines?
Well, when they claim it's specifically made for these engines, they would first have to design one for a specific bigger engine. But I don't know. What does everybody else think about this? Sounds like a horrible idea to me.
Yeah.
I've actually seen some of these veggie oils run on 7.3 Power Strokes. Now, all three of those engines you mentioned are pre-DPF. The only one, even with EGR, would be a 6.0. The 5.9s, I don't even know if they put an EGR on them until they come out with the DPF, actually, at the same time. But a 7.3 Power Stroke never had anything on it. That's what I drive every day, and there's no emissions on it whatsoever.
Yeah, that's. And when you think of that, Bruce, that's. I was like, yeah, I'm not really sure either. I just, like I said, Jesus was talking about that.
Let me read you. Let me read you one sentence from their own website. Listen to this. This is from their FAQ page, which is always one of the first places I go when I'm trying to read something new because there's a lot of information here. Number 6 in FAQ. Is it legal? The answer for this is rather ambiguous at best. No, it's not, and they're about to tell us why it's not ambiguous. I hate when people write like this. When used for biodiesel, it is 100% legal since biodiesel is recognized as a fuel by the EPA. So they should have had a proofreader here because that's a poorly written sentence. Waste vegetable oil is not, however, a recognized fuel and by law illegal to run. It's not ambiguous. They try to say if you call...
Why advertise that then?
Well, here's what they're trying to say. If you call your used vegetable oil biodiesel, it's legal. But if it's vegetable oil, it's not. That's like saying a man can be a woman. I'm sorry, you don't get to claim what you are. You are what you are. You're a man or you're a woman.
You are what you are.
Right. You're a biodiesel or you're a vegetable oil. You can't say we're going to call our vegetable oil biodiesel and now it's legal.
16 years ago, I knew a guy that was collecting vegetable oil, deep fryer oil from restaurants. He was running in a mechanical Dodge Cummins, going to and from a job building houses. So he wasn't putting a lot of miles on. He was spending a lot of time. I saw his filtration system. He was going through a lot of work to run this used deep fryer oil. And you could never collect enough to run it and filter enough to run in a semi-truck if you're going to run the truck every day.
Well, think of the cost of it. So they try to address this. I'm not even going to read this horribly complicated paragraph on return on investment because it's a bunch of doublespeak and gobbledygook. The system itself costs $5,000. That's the system itself. Ooh. Yeah, exactly. Now we have to go find a source of used vegetable oil. And we have to find a way to go collect it and deal with it and store it and process it and do all this work.
And make sure it's clean enough.
Exactly.
Because a lot of that dirty, that's another problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I if you're calling to ask if you should do something like this or if we would ever want something like this for a big truck, my answer would be absolutely not.
Yeah. But that's...
Wait a minute. I'm not sure if I understand this. Here's another question. Is the tank heated? At this time, the best option for the customer is to source a tank local or order online and install a heated pickup. So they're selling me a system that isn't even complete. I got to go find something else to make this work.
You have to go get more.
Why don't they just sell me the damn tank that's heated? Why do I have to go somewhere else? And now I needed a heated tank. What does that do to my alternator? Makes it work harder. Heating something is not easy. Heating anything takes a lot of energy. So if now we're just going to wire this heater up, well, now we have a new power draw. There's lots of reasons to stay away from this.
Yeah, I looked at that. I was like, that's not. And like you'd have to filter the oil, and it'd be a lot of work. Go to a restaurant.
I think
it's too much work.
Right.
Well, when I saw what this guy went through, and he was in Colorado, and he was about 14 miles from me, and I saw his operation. I thought, you have got to be kidding me. I think he spent more time going around collecting and trying to filter. I think that was every evening is what his job was after he was done being a carpenter. I mean, it's...
Yeah. That's a big no-go for me.
Okay.
All right. We're going to wrap this up for today. We're just about at the end of the third hour. I don't want to get started on another call. Anybody have anything they want to close with today? Nobody. All right. Covered a lot of ground today. Good stuff. Thanks as always to the team from Pittsburgh Power, Bruce and Eric and Leroy. We'll do it again next week. In the meantime, if you have any questions, give them a call. If you're going to call them, please support them. It's the least we can do. They put in a lot of time here on this show. They do other shows. They write articles. They spend a lot of time with people. And they still maintain one of the lowest shop rates in the country, I swear, and you get much better service and knowledge. So please support them. Give them a call. Go to the website, buy stuff, take your truck to them, build a relationship, all that good stuff. We talk about it all the time. We'll see you tomorrow for Destination Health. I'm being joined by John Hewlett, the founder of Cardio Miracle. We will take your questions about the taste issue and why it's a better product now, and we'll help you with some ideas if the taste bothers you, and answer your questions. I think we may talk about a big event that Cardio Miracle is going to be sponsoring. I have an invite to it I'm kind of excited about, but we'll wait and see if John wants to talk about that tomorrow. We'll see you then. Be safe, be profitable, be fit and healthy. Always do the hard work and master the journey.